Tonight, Detective Comics makes me feel things for Harvey Bullock, and I'm not okay with that. Batman Incorporated goes out not with a bang, but with a much, much smaller bang. And Superboy goes to high school because the CW has ruined absolutely everything. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 100 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we did it. I mean, mostly I did it. I'm the one who's actually working here, but you were there. You've assisted me through your possible company this whole time. But yeah, we made it to 100 episodes. Hooray, huzzah. I'm so very happy that we did this. I mean, if I'm going to get real here for a minute, the whole reason I started this show, the whole reason that I began with it, is I already owned the entire New 52. I had bought it all because I am a completionist at heart, and when I started collecting comics, I needed a clear-cut place to start, and the New 52 just seemed like the place to go to. So when I then decided, I guess I should probably read some of these books, I have a problem holding myself accountable, of keeping up with things that I don't want to do. So I decided, well, I'm going to make a podcast and I'm going to put it out there so that there's just going to be this idea of a nebulous audience, a group of people that I don't know who are holding me accountable for me. You'll all be expecting, where's next week's episode? And it's that idea of you guys holding me accountable that has propelled me through all of the garbage I've had to read over the nearly past 2 years. So what I guess I'm saying is, stop it, and I'm filled with regret. No, obviously not. I've enjoyed every moment of this. This has been a fantastic experience. Obviously, we're only 40% of the way done. We've still got more to do than we have already done, so I'm looking forward to all that. But from the bottom of my heart, for people who are either joining in on this episode or have been here since the beginning, thank you. It means the world for me. I really enjoy the fact that you have tuned in for as long as you have and continue to tune in for each of these episodes. So that's enough mushy-gushy stuff. It's episode 100. We got to do something special. Now, I've got something planned for the end of the episode, which if you're watching the video version, you can see it down towards the bottom there. But for the beginning of the episode, I got something as well. So I'm going to do some editing magic here. I'm going to do a big old fade to white. So 3, 2, 1. There you go. Now for the audio people, nothing would have changed. Everything is exactly the same. But for the video people, nothing should have changed except down in the little social bar I've got beneath me, used to say the Twitter. Now it says a Discord link. Why did I make such a minute yet important change? If you've been keeping up with Twitter, you already know the answer to that. It's a trash fire over there. So if you want to tweet out, the Twitter will still be there. We will be using it occasionally. I just might take a bit longer to see it. If you really want to reach out and get me, obviously comments on the video, number 1. But number 2, join our Discord. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on over there. It's super great. Be sure to check that out, link in the description, even if you're listening to this in the audio version. So anyway, all that said and done, I have gone on long enough. I'm going to tell you what comics we're talking about. So this week, we did have some new releases, despite the fact I didn't even mention, it's a 5th week. So we have annuals, and those include the second annuals of Batman, Detective Comics, Superman, Flash, and Animal Man. Additionally, because people can't keep up with deadlines, we have the 13th issue and finale of Batman Incorporated, 22nd issues of Superboy and Red Lanterns, and the 2nd issue of Trinity of Sin, which is a tie-in to Trinity War. So I'm thinking the order that we do this is annuals first, then we'll hit up Trinity War, and then we'll do all the rest. And then, after all that, stay tuned, because I also have backup comics that I need to do. Not nearly as much as last time, but still a decent amount. But I will get to those when we get to them, so let's start it off right now with the one that everyone cares about, Batman Annual number 2. Batman Annual number 2, written by Scott Snyder and Marguerite Bennett, art by Wes Craig. So this is just an entirely separate thing set up here. We've got a new orderly at Arkham, has transferred over. He is apparently from Metropolis, and his name is Eric Border. He's an optimist, and we see him basically coming into Arkham the same night that Batman shows up, and he's like, well, what are you waiting for? Lock me up. And turns out that this is the night where they are opening a new wing to Arkham Asylum, and Batman's going to just basically be the test dummy to see where their weaknesses are so that these supervillains will stop breaking out. But first we follow Eric a little bit. He's led around Arkham Asylum by one of the current orderlies, and it's just like, yeah, no, you really need to tone down the optimism, buddy, because it is a bit... like, this place is dark, like, it's messed up. And we walk through, we see, like, the Riddler and Clayface and Mad Hatter. And then eventually he sees this dark hallway where there's a single door down at the end. And he's like, what about down there? Who's down there? And he's like, oh, that's the oldest inmate we have at Arkham. She's called the Anchoress. And we don't worry about her. She's not important. She doesn't do anything big. So she's just down there. And we hear her call out saying, please come back, as they walk away. So then we see Batman's, he's being put to the test. And the Jeremiah Arkham is the one running it. And he's like, yep, nope, we've got all this stuff set up. You've been placed in a cell the same way any other supervillain would. Go for it. See if you can escape. And Batman looks around a cell and he's like, all right, you've got some good defenses here. There's no human contact. Everything's done by computers. That's good. However, I've managed to sneak some acid into the palm of my hand. Like, I made a surgical incision weeks ago, so I managed to get past your metal detectors. So I'll use that to break out of the cell itself. And then when he gets out, he activates some pressure plates. Where he's like, well, Man-Bat can fly around, so you need motion sensors everywhere. And they're like, yeah, we got him. And then he's hit with some goop that freezes him to the floor. And he's like, Killer Croc would be able to shed his skin. Same way I can get out with my veneer off my armor or whatever. And so basically he just keeps on trying to escape. And we see Eric during this point. He's been told to leave because he was kind of getting a bit excitable for Dr. Arkham. And he goes back downstairs and he's like, Anchoress, you said come back? And he goes up to her and he sees that she is this just horribly tattered and wrinkled old woman with jet black eyes, and she's just not looking so good. And he's like, oh God, are you hurt? And he's like, no, I was a voluntary patient. And she basically just gives a rundown of why she was here, and that she grew up, she was super interested in like physics and science and stuff like that, which during her time, which she says is right when the Curies had won the Nobel Peace Prize. So way too long ago for her to still be alive, but she was trying to become a scientist, and her parents were like, no, you're going to be a normal girl and marry and have a bunch of babies and whatnot. And she argued against them, and eventually a fight broke out where a bunch of her chemicals exploded and her family was killed. And she was left alive, but she was unable to touch anything. And as she explains later, the scientists have discovered that she's basically quantum tunneling. Her electrons can move through stuff, and she's able to go through anything. So voluntarily, she locked herself up in Arkham. She got some help. She was starting to feel better. And then the real crazy started showing up. Batman showed up and started loading in all these villains. And it made it so that the people who genuinely needed help, like her, were unable to get it. And so she views Batman as the cause of why she has not gotten better, as to why this place has become its own personal hell. And Eric's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That sounds awful. What do you want me to do? And she's like, I just want people to know I'm down here. Could you just let them know? And maybe they could give me some help. And he's like, I'm kind of brand new. I'm not sure what I can do. She's like, fair enough. And then she just walks through the wall of her cell. And Eric's like, that doesn't seem too good. And she's like, oh yeah, I could have left at any point. This energy field they've got going on it conked out weeks ago. Like, I could have left at any time. But now I've been waiting for when Batman showed back up, so I will get my revenge on him. And she knows that he's around because she hears everyone whispering and talking about him. So she's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to take care of Batman and I'm going to get out of here. So we see Batman still trying to make his way through all the traps, when as he's fighting against one of them, the Anchoress comes out and just starts attacking Batman. And of course, he's unable to punch her because she can phase through anything. But she's able to, with her quantum tunneling, mess with like the electrons flow of his brain and whatnot. So it really does like do some serious damage to him. Eric goes around and is just like, okay, she said her plan was she's going to break every inmate out of Arkham, because she did technically say that. So they're off to stop that and hopefully see what they can do to save Batman as well. So Anchorus is just toying with Batman, but as he's stumbling around trying to stop her, he keeps on activating other traps that the asylum now has, and she's just like, oh, I'm going to take full advantage of this. And she says, I remember the first time I saw you, and it turns out it was just before Batman became Batman. It was during Zero Year, where he broke into the asylum trying to find some information on the Red Hood gang, and she caught him as he broke in and like started trying to attack him. And it was at that point that he sneaked off without being found, and all of the orderlies thought that she had just gotten violently crazy, so she was put on extra lockdown. So it's Batman's fault that she's as locked up as she is. And Batman's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. And she goes on this long tirade of like, oh, the worst way to die is in a cage, not a gun, not a knife, it's in a cage. And I'm gonna let you die in a cage of your own mind as I make you essentially catatonic. So she touches inside his brain. It starts stoking on a bunch of fears and stuff like that. We, of course, go back to the alley with the pearls. And she's like, oh, your parents died. Isn't that so sad? And then we see him shoot awake to Owlman from the Court of Owls storyline, Lincoln March. And he gets killed. And she's like, oh, you let your own brother die. Isn't that so sad and scary? And then we see Damien also impaled. And he's like, Dad, you let me die. And she's like, oh, you let your son die. Isn't that so sad and scary? So all that crumbles away, and she starts taunting Batman. She's like, oh yeah, you now welcome to your own cage. You'll be locked up here forever. And then Batman, he gets a tiny little few second reprieve because Eric and the other orderlies show up with a bit of the bars that was holding her, and they're feeding energy in it so that it can disrupt her powers. Gives Batman just enough time to escape, and Eric's like, look, we got her, we can take her, she doesn't have anything against us, you go, we can't save you if you're not here. So Batman goes off. Anchorus manages to get away for just a second, and she starts phasing through the floor. Apparently she somehow makes her way up to the roof. It got me on that one. And she fights down Batman up there. And she just is like weeping. She's like, you took my asylum away from me, my safety place, my Garden of Eden. And Batman's like, you just invaded my mind. I'm going to beat you up. And like, he's about to throw a punch or something, which he can still phase. So I don't know what the thing is. But then Eric comes up and says, no, Batman, don't do it. Can't you see that she's sick? And so he gets in the way. He collects Anchorus and Batman just stops, I guess. And we see Eric talking to the other orderly. They're getting some coffee, and it's just like, yeah, you know, she saw this place as a sanctuary, and you know what? I think it can be that way again. And so that little bit of optimism is serving out for it. I like it. I think it's good enough. It's just a completely separate little story. You don't need it for like 0 Year. You don't need it to explain anything going on otherwise. It's its fine little separate thing going on. So I like it. I think it is a good book in general. If I really had any major critiques, it's that it does feel, I don't want to say out of place, but it does feel like such a jarring, like, you know, we're in the middle of 0 Year, and then we just all of a sudden go over to this other thing. And I mean, nothing wrong with that if it's something, you know, like 0 Year's been going on a while, but I feel like this would have been the perfect place to explore more of that 0 Year stuff. Instead, they do that tiny little tie-in thing where they're like, oh, I actually caught you during the 0 Year. It's like, okay, it's cheap in that regard. I either wish they would have went all the way or not included it all and let it be its own separate thing entirely. Not to mention the cover on this, like, says 0 Year on it. So it's just tricking people into thinking it's more important than it is. But yeah, no, it's a fine enough little story. I think it's got a good message to it of, you know, asylums are meant to help people. And Arkham Asylum is the opposite of that. Whether or not that's Batman's fault, that's up for interpretation. But I think it was a nice little message they had to it. So overall, I'd say this one is probably just a flat 7. Art wasn't too standout. Nothing was that incredible with it. If I see The Death of Damien or Crime Alley one more time, I'm going to scream. But, it's the things that he's dealing with. What's weird is they brought back the Owlman thing. I didn't think he was really all that bothered about it, but apparently it is still messing with him a little bit underneath it all. So, we'll see if that comes to anything. But overall, yeah, this is a 7. It's just a nice average comic. Detective Comics Annual number 2, written by John Layman and Joshua Williamson, art by Scot, Eaton. This also has 2 backup stories in it, which I'm just going to do along with this because they are all the exact same story, and I will get to the artist when we get there. So we pick up 1 week ago where there's this woman who shows up and is trying to, she's, old, wrinkled, whatever. She's trying to withdraw a huge sum of money, and she's apparently very rich. And the bank manager comes out and is like, wait a minute, hold on, this woman's supposed to be dead. Who are you? And then all of a sudden the woman starts fighting against him, pulls out a gun, shoots a bunch of people, and runs out of the bank. And we see that she's just wearing a disguise. She's got like a wig and all that on. And Batman is narrating all this and it's like, yeah, no, she's got skills, whoever she may be. But she assumed that the police would take over 5 minutes to arrive. I made it in less than 3. So Batman intervenes, kicks the woman in the face. She goes down, runs down an alley. Batman gives chase and figures he's got her trapped, but all that's left behind is one of her masks. So at that point, the plot of the book, like Detective Comics, picks up as we see that the woman is interrupted by Wrath, who's like, I am Wrath. This is my Wrath copter. I'm not kidding you. He calls it his Wrath copter. And his thing is like, I've been killing cops. I need you to infiltrate the police. So do that for me. So then we cut to a week later and we see that 2 cops have been killed by Wrath. Again, Batman shows up and he's like, yeah, no, I'm taking care of it. It's just, we got to stop for the annual. And she's like, yeah, or Gordon's like, yeah, also I need you to take a look at this. And down the hill, we see this charred remains of a body that they have no idea who it is. And Harvey Bullock shows up and he's like, hey, Batman, we got ourselves a new precinct psychiatrist. Say hello to Abby something, Abby Wilburn. And it's obvious Harvey's into this chick. He's like trying to play her up. She's like, oh yeah, this is super cool. And basically saying like, look, Abby's going to write up a psych profile on whoever did this. So we'll see if she's of any use. So Batman takes a scan. We discover that the woman is Brenda Levins, who died at least 3 weeks ago, but she was seen performing a robbery just last week. So someone has taken her face and it's like, ah, yes, it's the same Jane Doe who I chased out last week. So name of the villain is Jane Doe. But then we see, Batman goes around, he fights a whole bunch of different people. He goes up against Clayface, which I think is a reference to Batman the Dark Knight. And we see the guy from the last issue of Detective. And then we see a man holding a knife to a woman's throat. And Batman just jumps in, says like, man, this guy's psychotic. He probably hasn't a good night's sleep in a while. And so he takes him out and realizes, oh, wait, this guy's a cop. And it turns out the reason he's psychotic is because Wrath has been going around killing people. So he lets the guy get some actual psychiatric help. And then Harvey Bullock comes up and is just like, hey, Batman, what do you think of Dr. Wilburn over there? I mean, maybe you want to talk to her about some of this stuff. And I can introduce you if you want. And we see that Harvey's like more clean shaven and he's wearing cologne. And Batman's like, oh my God, he's into Abby Wilburn. That's adorable. So Wilburn comes over and she's like, hey, Batman, I wrote up a psych profile on your killer. It's on this flash drive. Check it out when you get back to your base. And Harvey's like, yeah, I'm sure she did a great job too. And Batman's like, okay, this is weird. I'm out. Bye. But he does end up checking out the profile, and it's very, very strangely in depth. Like, it gets really into the mind of the person, and Batman's like, this doesn't seem right. Something suspicious about this. I'm gonna have to follow up on this. And he digs into some GCP records, and he finally figures out the truth. And we see that it all convenes at this mannequin warehouse where some random dude was a clothing guy, and then he disappeared. Or so we thought. And we see that Abby is holding a knife up to Harvey Bullock. And Batman breaks into the room and is just like, oh no. Harvey's like, kill her, Batman. She's not who she says she is. And then Abby's like, no, Harvey's Jane Doe. And Batman's like, Harvey is Jane Doe, seriously? But Batman has no time to think. He just has to throw a batarang, and he throws it, and it hits Harvey in the face. And it turns out that Harvey is not Harvey. Harvey is Jane Doe. So it turns out that Jane Doe had been replacing Harvey for like weeks now at that point, the entire time that Abby's been around. And she goes on this whole thing of like, yeah, I've been everybody. I've been a boxing champion. I've been all these things. Batman's like, nah, you're a murderer. You just took those things. You're a parasite. So Batman does end up taking Jane Doe down, and then Abby comes up and hits her in the face with a bat, and that's the end of that. So we see Harvey was downstairs in the basement of this warehouse. He's saved. He comes out and just like, oh, she had a camera set up. She made me watch as she stole my life away. And as he tries to like talk to Abby and be like, hey, I'm the real Harvey, she's like, I can't be around you. So we see Jane Doe being taken to Arkham, and Batman's like, oh, it doesn't matter. All that matters is this lunatic is off the streets of Gotham. And Jane Doe drives away, or is driven away. And then we see Jane perfectly imitating Batman's voice and saying his last line. And that's seemingly the end of that. But there are two backup stories in this. The first one is called Contained Multitudes, and it is same writing team, but art by Szymon Kudranski. So it looks great. And we see that Harvey has come to Arkham Asylum because Abby has transferred here, and Jane Doe is being examined by Abby. Abby's trying to get to the bottom of Jane Doe's psychiatric problems, and she keeps on imitating Abby, keeps on like throwing her voice and stuff like that. And Harvey comes in just like, hey, Jane, or Abby, here's the thing. You fell in love with a version of me, but you are clearly out of my league. So what happened to make you do that? Like, how could I improve myself as a person? And we see that, like, it seems that Abby is tearing him down, saying like, oh, I didn't fall in love with you. I fell in love with a much better version of you. You could never reach that. But turns out that's just Jane the whole time. And so Harvey starts yelling at Jane, saying like, stop that, stop acting like you're her. And then it turns out that as Jane's like, oh, but I could be whoever I want to be. It turns out that Harvey's not there either. And this whole thing is just inside Jane's head, where she's just holding full conversations with herself. And the guards are like, yeah, she's been going at that for like 6 hours now. You want to take lunch? And so they just walk away. And then the last story we get here is art by Derlis Santacruz, where Harvey, we see Jane Doe as Harvey is getting some surveillance tech, some very high-def cameras, so that she will be able to show the real Harvey what she's doing via a little lapel pin. And Harvey's just forced to watch it all. And he's like, I'm going to make you a better you. And you're going to be forced to watch as nobody even figures it out. And so he makes more arrests. He does a better job at his job. Gordon tells him how great of a job he's doing. He goes on dates with Abby. He's getting Abby to fall in love with him. And generally, he's just more liked by everyone else. And Harvey keeps on thinking like, surely somebody has to figure out eventually, right? But no one ever does. And we see finally Harvey is sitting at a bar, and a kid comes up being like, hey, you're Harvey Bullock. You saved my brother from a robbery last week. And Harvey's like, nah, kid, you got the wrong guy. He's like, no, I know it's you. Let me buy you a drink. And he's like, no, kid, you've got the wrong guy. And we see Harvey has become depressed by this revelation. So yeah, all of it just one self-contained story as far as I could tell. I doubt we'll see Jane Doe pop up elsewhere. If so, it's an interesting-ish character. I do think it's a bit one note, because what you're eventually going to get down to is Clayface. Like, that's all it is. It's just a new Clayface. It's someone who can take the personification of other people, but is actually someone else. Like, it's an easier to figure out Clayface, but still Clayface. So we'll see if they actually do anything with that character. Doubt it, but it's always a possibility. In terms of this issue as a whole, the art styles are very different from each other. Obviously, I enjoy Szymon Kudranski's art, but it is the standout, very different one than everything else in this issue. Scot, Eaton, and Derlis Santacruz are very, very similar comparatively. So I enjoyed the story. I like the extra little diving into the consequences of it and the two backup stories, but it is kind of just a bit of a letdown of I don't feel like we got quite enough as to why this villain is anything different than something like Clayface. So I'm going to say this overall probably is a 7.5. It's good. It's still a fine issue. It's completely standalone as far as I could tell, except for the stupid ass of Wrathcopter. Like, cut out that page. Just that page. That's all you need. But yeah, no, it's fine. It's a fine enough story. It's a 7.5. Superman Annual Number 2, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Dan Jurgens. So, I don't even know where to begin with this one. I mean, it's a lead-in to Psy-War. That's the big thing. This is the prelude, part 1, however you want to call it, to Psy-War. So we open up with Lois Lane. She is surrounded by shattered glass, and this whole issue is narrated by her. And some people are rushing in saying, oh, we need to get medical attention. But then Superman shows up and is like, oh, you guys go call an ambulance. I'll take care of Miss Lane here. And Lois is narrating like, Superman, I knew I could always trust him. He's super cool. By the way, the narration also says like, this, my name is Lois Lane and this is my last story, my last byline. So implying that she's going to die here. And Superman does some x-ray vision and it's like, oh no, he can already see that it's too late for me. So then we cut back to chapter 1, like a week ago. She's talking to her boyfriend, John Carroll, who's off in like the Himalayas or something. And then Clark calls up and is like, oh, hey, Lois, I just wanted to give you a call about that thing you asked me for, like, the mayors or whatever. And Lois is like, yes, Clark, you're a great reporter, even if you are working on a blog. And she's like, okay, yeah, thanks, Lois, bye. So she hangs up, and then she hears, she's the only one at the Daily Planet, all the lights are out, and she hears something go thud. And as she walks out, she sees there's a woman there who's saying, Miss Lane, please, I need your help. And Lois can't make out her face, but she's like, well, yeah, come on into the light. Come over here. And he's like, no, I think I should stay over here. I don't want to be close to anybody else. And then as Lois approaches her, she throws out like a psychic blast that throws Lois into some cubicles and then collapses. And as Lois gets up and runs over, we see that she looks like a normal girl, except that her head is tinted green and is huge. Like, her brain is exploding out of her skull. So Lois realizes, okay, she's already dead. She had some sort of seizure or something. So I'm not going to call an ambulance. I'm instead going to take this body over to Star Labs. And Star Labs is like, well, this young woman came for you for a reason. So you figure out that, and then we can figure out who she is. So Superman comes in, because of course he is, and he's like, oh, did you know this girl, Miss Lane? And he's like, no, but, she already asked for some help, and we'll see what's up. And Clark x-rays the random girl and finds out, okay, turns out that all of her cells have been like torn apart and put back together again via like a psychic link. So she was messed up, and it's been over the course of like several years that this has happened. So maybe she even did this to herself. So Lois goes down to the parking garage, realizes this girl must have driven in. We see a flashy sports car, and Lois hops in and finds out that this woman's name is Amelia Darling, which immediately sends up red flags because she's one of the 20. What is the 20? Well, way back in Grant Morrison's Action Comics, during the invasion of Brainiac, Metropolis was bottled. And it turns out that during this period, 20 people went missing. And Lois was the one who broke the story, that as they were bottled, 20 people just disappeared, and nobody can figure out where they went to. And so she published the story and tried to keep up on all their different people. So now she's doing some more investigation into 20, because clearly one of them has been around, if only secretly and hidden under the shadows. And we find out that another one of them, like, yeah, no, he kept on showing up to work here. He was always around. And so Lois is like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So she does some more deep diving, but she, keeps it under wraps. She doesn't let anybody know what she's doing. And she discovers that out of the 20, 5 of them had died over the past few years, but like they were still around. Like, people knew where they were. They were just controlling perceptions of themselves somehow. So Lois makes her way to the funeral of Amelia, and she sees someone in the back who, like, is a shadow, runs and hides. Lois gives chase, and we see she gets psionically blasted again. And this one is some dude who was a soldier named Sung, and he's like, oh, your own mother thinks you're dead. And it's like, yes, I had to make her think that for her own safety. Look, you shouldn't pursue this matter. The truth will doom you. And Lois is like, okay, show me what's up. And so Sung lets down the psionic barrier, the little, glimmer he's got going on. And turns out he also has the big green head. And he's like, this is my true form. I'm a monster, Lois. And Lois is like, okay, now could you understand? I'm not sure what's up. And he's like, no, she would not let us. So he runs away again, saying there's no cure, it's only death. If you want answers, talk to Senator Hume. So Senator Hume is the one who, I think it was in Action Comics, was trying to really attack Superman. Of like, well, let us into your Fortress of Solitude. It's an American thing. So Lois is at this party where he's supposed to be, as well as Clark. Clark tries to talk to Lois and be like, oh, you seem a little bit on edge, Lois. What's up? And she's like, nothing. I gotta go. So she runs over, talks to Senator Hume. Hume immediately just talks to her via like psychic link. And Lois is like, oh, okay, well, should we go to a separate room then? And at that point, Hume lays it all out. He's like, yeah, nope, here's the thing. During the Bottled City thing, Brainiac sent in some like drones or whatever to approach us and take us. Because as it turns out, on his home planet of Kolu, Vril Dox, a.k.a. Brainiac, he's trying to save his people. That's the whole thing, is that there was a coming danger where he had to upload all of their consciousnesses to a higher state of being, and once that was said and done, he's looking for other bodies that he's going to be able to replace them with. And so he's tried this on all the bottled cities. He takes like 20 people, tries to implant them with Kolu like technology to see if they'll survive, and then if they do, then he's going to implant he's going to take over the human race and take all of the Kolu people and put them in human bodies, since clearly they can survive the process. So we see that some of them, they kept their powers secret, some of them hid off the grid, some of them used their powers to achieve these higher places, like he became a senator, and he's like, yeah, no, but using your powers comes at a risk. I've already overused my powers. I'm probably going to die now. So you need to figure this out, because Brainiac's coming back. He's on his way back now. You got to deal with it. And Lois is like, I will, I promise. And he's like, nah, not good enough. I'm going to make this personal for you. And so he blasts her with some psychic stuff. She goes through some glass, and we pick up to where we were at the beginning of the story, where Superman's able to tell, and Lois as well, that Lois is now one of the quote-unquote 20. She is infected with this Brainiac virus thing that's going to end up killing her. So, yeah, that's the story. Leading into Psy-War, wherever the hell part 1 of that's going to be. I think it's in Superman. I think I read that later on, but we'll see. I don't like it. I mean, here's the thing. It's not an awful idea for a story of, Brainiac. It was the first big villain. He did something, and now he's coming back. It's a fine enough idea for a story. The problem being is that it feels so tacked on. Like, that was Grant Morrison's thing. He clearly did his own thing entirely. And then Scott Lobdell came in and was just like, by the way, while that was going on, this other thing was also going on. And I'm just going to kind of hijack that whole story, which is not the worst, but it does kind of, like, the whole thing of Grant Morrison's part in that was that, oh, Brainiac, the collector at this point, is just that, a collector. He's doing it to collect things. That's the whole point. But no, actually, according to this new thing, he's actually tragic. He's trying to save his people, and he's going to take over. Like, it takes away from the original story. I'm okay with you adding, but this takes away by trying to add. So yeah, not great. I'm not that psyched about Psy-War. Obviously, we got some other stuff with Hector Hammond going on and Hive. Lord only knows how that's all going to tie together. Scott Lobdell is writing both Superman books right now. This is the event that he's been building to here. Not even counting Hell on Earth. So I don't know. I'm not interested. This did nothing to interest me. So overall, I'm going to give this one like a 6. Not great. It's not awful either. It's just, who cares? Like, that's as easy as I could say it. Who cares? The Flash Annual number 2, written by Brian Buccellato, art by Sami Basri. So this is kind of a evergreen story. It can slot in wherever, but the main thing to know is that Hal Jordan, because Green Lantern is in this book, is going to Oa because he's taking over the Green Lantern Corps and he's not going to be back for a while. So Barry has taken him out to a jazz club, and Hal's like, this is stupid. Jazz sucks. And Barry's like, you suck. Jesus, why am I even your friend? And then all of a sudden they teleport out and they are put onto a spaceship surrounded by a bunch of aliens, and they immediately recognize it as Arena World. And they're just like, oh, hey, Green Lantern, Flash, glad we got you. You made a deal with us a while back. Now you got to own up to it. And Barry's like, I'm sorry, what deal are we talking about here? And Hal's like, So then we get to a few years ago, which is actually a story of how Flash and Green Lantern met. And there's a bunch of kids going missing from group homes, like orphanages and such. They're just disappearing by the bunch load, and it's all over the country. And obviously this was bumped up to like FBI, but they have no leads. And Barry's like, well, I just recently became the Flash, so I'll go ahead and look into it. And a pattern finally started to emerge, and he manages to find the next abduction is going to be at Coast City. So he runs over there, and as he approaches the building, Hal Jordan comes up and is like, so you like stealing little kids, huh? And he's like, what? No, that's not, I'm here to stop that. And he phases out of the Green Lantern construct, and he holds up a badge being like, I'm a police investigator to some extent. And Green Lantern's like, yeah, that's great. How the hell did you just phase out of my construct? And so they start arguing about each other, and Barry's like, wait a minute, I've heard of you. I thought you were just a myth. And he's like, you've heard of me? He's like, yeah. You're Superman, right? He's like, no, I'm not I'm Green Lantern. Come on, man. I'm wearing a big old green suit. And so they're about to start like bickering at each other, fighting each other, when all of a sudden there's a big flash of light inside the orphanage, and Green Lantern flies off. Barry puts on a suit and runs inside. He sees a teleporting hole just about to close, so he runs inside of that. And on the other side is Green Lantern fighting off some aliens. And he's like, oh, geez, are we in space? Green Lantern's like, Barry, is that you? He's like, no, I'm Flash. And he's like, dude, you're barely putting on a voice, and I know I literally just saw you. Whatever. If you got superpowers, then help me out. Help me fight. And so they start fighting off all these aliens. They see some of the kids are safe. And so Barry takes a second to adjust, like, wait a minute, I'm in outer space right now. And he's like, yeah, no, totally. How about you take those kids? The teleporter grid is over there. Just take them home, and I'll take care of the rest of them. So Barry teleports him home, and then immediately teleports himself back, meets back up with Green Lantern, and just like, yeah, no, it's whole thing. And he keeps on calling Barry, and Barry's like, dude, call me the Flash. It's secret identity. And he's like, why? I know who you are. Who cares? Nobody else here cares who you are. Like, look. And he takes off his Green Lantern mask. He's like, I'm Hal Jordan. And Barry's like, no, come on, man. Secret identities. There's a reason for this. But then all of a sudden they hear a kid yelling in pain. And so Barry runs his way towards the sound. Turns out the kids are being trained in some gladiator pits by this huge dude. And one of the kids got smacked down. So Flash puts him in a whirlwind. He gets smacked away. Flash and Green Lantern do a team up to take this guy out. And then they're like, okay, these are all the kids except for 3. There are 3 more kids that were abducted that are still unaccounted for. So they ask those kids, where are the other kids? And one of them points over to a floating structure and says Arena World. So Green Lantern flies his way over there, and he tells Flash, like, hey, get those other kids back. I'll take care of Arena World. So we see in Arena World that there's this group of aliens who are recruiting these children to basically become future gladiators. And they're saying like one of them's like, humans are weak. You should never have bet on them. We'll beat you as soon as they're grown up or whatever. And he's like, yeah, we'll see about that. So Green Lantern comes in, starts laying down the hurt. He asks the ring where the kids are, and the ring identifies them as inside of these huge dog-like aliens. And he's like, okay, can't hurt the aliens then. So he's taken a bit back by the fact that he can't just punch these things out. Flash manages to teleport back. Green Lantern explains the situation. Flash phases the kids out of the aliens. And just like, there, cool, we did it. And then all of a sudden, the aliens who are running the show are like, hey, humans, cool. Here's the thing. we need these kids. I'm owner of the arena team. Like, I gotta do this thing. And Flash is like, we're not gonna let you take these kids. And Green Lantern's like, hold on. I'm a space cop. Let me talk this out. Let me see if I can get this done. You take those kids back home. So Barry takes the kids back home, and Green Lantern makes a deal with the space aliens. And Barry's like, the deal was we have to fight for them in the future, right? And Green Lantern's like, yeah, but I mean, I didn't think they'd ever come to collect. And he's like, why would you think they would not come to collect? That seems like the most obvious thing that they would eventually do. So either way, they both power up, and they are put out into this gladiatorial arena. And it's like, okay, so it's your standard fight to the death, only one left standing, and then we have to fight like their champion. And Flash is like, okay, and did you think to tell them that we don't kill people? And I was like, we'll figure out some way around it, no big deal. And so they just start arguing with each other about like, oh, I wish you would think ahead a little bit. I wish you would plan out. And Hal's like, oh, well, I wish you would actually take some action. I wish you'd just do something or whatnot. But regardless, a fight starts up, and they have to fight their way out. And it's a whole big action fight scene. But because of this environment, Barry, for some reason, is a little bit less connected to the Speed Force. He loses the powers a bit. But Green Lantern's like, yeah, no, I'm good. I've learned my lesson. I keep my battery with me at all times. So they manage to take out everybody, but they're not killing them. They're just knocking them out. And the crowd is booing them, yelling at them like, oh, yeah, you guys suck. And it's like, all right, whatever. So they're ready to fight the champion, but then they make the point of like, no, only one of you can be left standing. You need to take each other out. And it's like, well, that's not what's going to happen. We're not going to do that. And so one of them launches a trap that enraptures Green Lantern. Flash tries to get it off of him, but is unable to do so. And Flash is like, okay, look, I'll just take out the champion real quick and we'll be all good. We can do that. And we see the champion come in, and Barry is doing his best to attack him, but his Speed Force powers are weakened a bit, so he's not quite as agile as he should be. And then Barry comes over to Hal, and he's like, what do I do? How do I beat this guy? And Hal's like, I don't know, just don't think about it. Like, thinking's overrated. Just go by instinct. And then all of a sudden, the ring comes off of Hal's finger and puts itself onto Barry's finger. And he's like, you have the ability to outrun great fear. Do what you got to do here. And so he uses his speed mind to just get all the rules in his head, just figure out everything he needs to know regarding the ring. And he's like, cool, great. I got like one shot at this. So he scans the monster for a weak point. He finds that it's in this guy's crotch. So he runs underneath the monster, blasts upward with a Green Lantern gun, and takes him out. And the crowd loves it, but it drains Barry. Like, he was not good with using that ring. And then we cut to a little bit later. All of the organizers of Arena World have been handcuffed. They're all tied up. And Flash is like, oh, so you're actually like doing a space cop thing now. It's like, yeah, they're running a like fighting ring. Clearly I'm going to arrest them. But I just needed the rest of the Corps to help me out. So Hal and Barry hop on a little motorbike out of green constructs, and they start riding their way towards Earth. And just like, well, you got your way of doing things and I've got mine, but neither of them are wrong. They're just our own personal ways of doing things. And so Hal's like, well, hey, before you go home, how about a space bar? I got a real cool place to go to. So that's the story. It's good. It's a fine enough story. I don't think it was a bad issue at all. I do think that the Flash Green Lantern, because that was the thing back in like, what would have been Justice League number 2? 3, very early on, it was established that they knew each other beforehand. I like the fact that we get their first story. I like the fact that we went back and we're like, here's how they met and here's how they became somewhat of friends. So yeah, I'm all good with this. It's a good enough story. My only real critique to it is that it is so separate from what's going on in Flash, but it still links up to Green Lantern. That's the weird part. Like, it feels more like a Green Lantern annual than it does a Flash annual. But I suppose the fact that he delivered the final punch at the end is what makes it the Flash annual. So overall, it is still a good story. I'll give this one I'll give it a 7.5. I do enjoy Sami Basri's art. It's been a while since they've been on a book, but I enjoy it when I see it. So yeah, 7.5. Animal Man Annual number 2, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Travel Foreman. So this is set in between issues 20 and 21. give or take, somewhere around there. Basically before the main plot kicked off in Animal Man. So it's a week after Cliff's funeral, and we see Buddy is just not doing okay. He's boarded himself up into his house, and there's a bunch of people outside of, or I say his house, his hotel room. There's a bunch of people outside the hotel who are like holding up signs of support and like, oh yeah, we love you, blah, blah, evolve or die. We care about you, Buddy. And news anchors and stuff like that. And Buddy's just like, doesn't want to do anything with that. So he jumps out a window and sneaks his way down to the convenience store. And when he goes in to buy some what appears to be beer, he sees some tabloids on the counter that are basically accusing the whole thing of his son dying to be a hoax, to be just a publicity stunt. And Buddy just immediately loses it. He throws the tabloids down and starts ripping them up. And as he does so, on the cover of one of the things, he sees a tiny little purple spider. And that immediately causes him to flash back to 4 years ago, where he's fighting as Animal Man a giant mechanized wolf called Biowolf, and the cop's like, oh, Animal Man, thank God you're here. We need some help taking down Biowolf. And he's like, no problem, Detective Crenshaw. So he uses his animal abilities to overcome Biowolf. He uses the power of a ram to just hit it dead square in the chest, which breaks its armor and transforms it back from a giant wolf into a man. And it's like, oh, this was the missing scientist for weeks. Thank you, Animal Man. And the man's like, no problem, guys. Whoops, hold on, got a call. And he picks up his cell phone. Turns out it's Ellen, who is pregnant with Maxine at this point. And she's just like, hey, did you go and pick up Cliff? And he's like, oh, wait, sorry, no, I got distracted. I'll go over there. I'll fly over right away. And he's like, buddy, come on. We got another kid coming on the way. You got to stay a bit more focused. He's like, right, no, sorry, totally. By the way, stop at the convenience store and pick me up some pregnant person cravings. So he flies off to Cliff's school and picks up Cliff. All the other kids are watching on jealously at Animal Man just coming out of the sky, picking up Cliff and flying off again. And as they're flying, Cliff is like, Dad, this is the first kid we're going to have with, my sibling. Since you got your powers, is my sibling going to have your powers too? Because that would suck if I'm the odd man out here. And Body's like, no, Cliff, no matter what, you are my firstborn. You are my son. Don't ever forget that. So they land at the grocery store and go to pick up some stuff when all of a sudden a bunch of sirens go by. And Cliff wants to go check it out, but he's like, no, we should stay back. We've got some other stuff to do. And we see Detective Crenshaw is also there. And they're like, yeah, no, we thought it was just like a homeless person thing, just yelling out in the street. But then he led us to this, and we see this giant, empty lot that's covered in webs that are purple. And it's like, yeah, no, this looks spider related, and I hate spiders. And the man's like, no problem, Detective Crenshaw, you guys stay back. Cliff, you stay with the cops. I'm just going to go up and see what's up. And he goes up to touch it, and then all of a sudden his brain just melts, and he transforms into a purple Spider-Man, and his stomach opens up and a bunch of other spiders come out, and then all of a sudden he shakes out of it. And he looks around, and only Detective Crenshaw is left, and he is shook. He's like, the spiders that came, they took all of them. Your son, buddy, it took your son. Or Animal Man, I should say. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I should have done something. So Buddy immediately is like, where'd they go? I'm going to take care of this. And they went down into the sewer. So Buddy goes down. He sees a bunch of rats running in the opposite direction. He picks one up and he's like, hey, Buddy, talk to me. What's up? And all of a sudden Buddy's phone goes off and he's like, okay, well, hold on one sec. And it turns out it's Ellen. And Ellen is not calling to check up on them. Ellen is calling because her water just broke. So Buddy's like, oh my God, okay, call an ambulance. I will be there. I will meet you at the hospital. I will have Cliff. There's something going on. So he hangs up. A bunch of spiders start attacking him. And he gets the powers of a shark and bites into one of the spiders. But as he's doing so, the spiders have some sort of a psychic thing. They're able to reach inside his head and really mess with him. So he's barely able to fight him off. But he does still send them scattering down the way they came. And as he follows them down, he comes across this giant spider woman. Her name is Anansi, I believe. And she's only speaking in clicks. There's no way that Buddy can understand her. And he's like, okay, look, you got my son. and some other less important people. I'm just going to save them, and then we can talk about this. But as he goes to rip Cliff out of the webs, she hisses and goes to grab Buddy and basically webs him up. So he's unable to do anything. But as she is invading his mind via the webs, he starts to be able to understand her. And he's saying like, yes, my young must be fed. It's important to me. And Buddy comes out and sees the psychic representations of not only all the cops that were taken, but also Cliff. And the Anansa is her name. Anansa reveals, my spiders are psychic, and therefore they feed off of psychic residue. And we've typically only stuck to like lower, lesser animals like birds and raccoons and such. But we just tried human, and boy, oh boy, your dream stuff is good. And Buddy's like, okay, I get it. I understand. You want to protect your children. I too want to protect my child. That is my child there. So how about we come to an agreement? And he says, you guys, I will let you go. No fighting. I will just let you leave. You have to let these people go. And he's like, okay, but can we keep their dream stuff? Can we keep the dreams that we've already eaten? And he's like, go for it. You can keep the dream stuff. Just let them go. And so the Anansa agrees, lets them all of their psychic bond, and makes her way out. And as everybody's coming to, nobody remembers what happened. They just remember they were taken by something, and that they all were having really good dreams and they were enjoying their time. So everyone comes to it and just like, okay, great. Everyone cool? And Cliff is like, yeah, should we call mom about this? And immediately Buddy's like, oh crap, your mom. So grabs Cliff, flies out of the sewer, tells Crenshaw like, yeah, everyone else is down there. I got to go by. And flies off to the hospital, uses the speed of a cheetah to roar down the halls. And then right outside the room is just like, now Cliff, let's not tell your mom about the giant spider thing, okay? And Cliff's like, no problem, Dad. And they make their way into the room, and turns out Ellen already gave birth. So Maxine was already born, and she doesn't seem that upset, but, he did miss the birth of the child. So we cut back to present reality. We see that a bunch of people are now taking pictures of Buddy as he went mental on all these tabloids. He gets out of the crowd, he flies away, and he flies off to a coast nearby. And he's like, I'm tracking her down. I can still feel her in the red. She's like still there, kind of. I can feel her pulling psychically. And he enters a cave, and inside are a bunch of purple spiders. And as he makes his way in, he sees that the webs all contain things like birds and raccoons and deer and such. And Nansa's like, oh, hey, it's you again. What's up? And he's like, hey, yeah, you remember me. Great. You remember my kid? He's gone. And I was just kind of wondering, and Nansa's like, you want me to give you back the dream stuff that your kid had? And he's like, yeah, I just want to see it. I need to know what he was dreaming. And so Anansa gives the dream material back to Buddy, and it's a full page spread of just him and Cliff flying through the sky with Cliff wearing Animal Man's mask. And Animal Man thanks Anansa, just saying thank you so much for this, as he curls up in the fetal position inside a web next to Anansa. And that's the issue. It's a downer and a half. I'll give you that much, man. It is heavy. I really like it. I've been wanting more Travel Foreman art. Obviously, he stopped after the Rot World stuff, but man, it was so nice to see that period when he transformed into the purple spider. It looks so grotesque. And then you add on this idea of you've got a villain that's not really a villain. It's just part of the animal cycle. It's its own thing. And it's just trying to look out for its kids, and Buddy and it come to an understanding, and it comes back in this super painful way at the end. Great story. Absolutely love it. Obviously, you kind of need to know what's going on in Animal Man to really get it, but even if it's not a totally standalone story, it is great just to pick up on its own, and it's a hard-hitting one. So overall, I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think it's really, really good. I cannot speak more highly of it for what it is as an annual. So, yeah. Trinity of Sin, Pandora, number 2, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Daniel Sampere. So, last issue was basically just full-on intro and backstory. By the way, this is a tie-in to Trinity War, which technically this whole series has been, but regardless, This is the first of the actual, like, hey, let's do something here. So we pick up in Egypt with Pride and Envy, and they're talking and saying, like, by the way, Pride, Pandora's gonna try to open the box, and she's seeking to erase us. And Pride's like, psh, whatever. I don't care. She can't stop us. But either way, go and try to delay her. This is my design. This is my plan to stop her. So that doesn't come back. So if you remember in Trinity War, Pandora met up with Superman and Wonder Woman. And at the part where they met up with, we see that not only do we have Shade following up on the super explosion stuff that happened, but also Argus is there. And they're both vying for whose jurisdiction this actually is. And we see that the difference is Shade deals with parahumans, whereas Argus deals with metahumans. What's the difference? I don't know. But regardless, they're trying to figure out, like, oh, because of these energy readings, whatever, it should be one or the other. And they're basically just arguing about jurisdiction all the time. But we see in Baltimore, we have Pandora meeting up with a guy named Marcus, who's, I guess, basically her magical arms dealer and has a whole bunch of magic stuff that she's going to use and take into battle. And she's like, yeah, no, I don't want any of this to happen, but I've got a feeling that I'm not in control of this anymore. So then we cut to some place. I don't even think it says where, but we have Vandal Savage, Signal Man, and Giganta, who are apparently all members of this secret society thing going on. And it's like, ah, yes, Argus has classified Pandora meeting up with Superman killing Dr. Light as a super crime. So therefore, we gotta investigate that. And Signal Man's like running over all these signals, and Vandal Savage is like, can you find Pandora? And it's like, why Pandora? It's like, oh, she's trying to use the box. She's trying to open it up. So at that point, they're trying to track down where Pandora is. Signal Man's like, no dice. She's been off the grid for too long. And then they start talking to each other about, like, what does the secret society want from us? We're just blindly following these orders. And Vandal Savage is like, I follow no orders. I am Vandal Savage. You would tremble to know what I'm thinking. So Pandora sees on the news that, you know, Superman killed Dr. Light and all that. And she's like, did you do something to Superman, Pandora? And it's just like, no, but I did. I don't know. It's kind of a blur whether or not this is my fault or not. But regardless, Superman was the only person who may have been pure of heart enough to open up the box. So I'm just ditching that side of things entirely. And we're going to go with the other side, where I need to find someone of the darkest of heart. And I've got a pretty good idea as to who that could be. So she suits up and heads out. And we see Signal Man suddenly gets a blip on his radar saying where Pandora is. It's literally right next to him. And Signal Man's like, haha, I'll give her a seizure so that way we can take care of her. And he just like does some light powers and nothing else happens. And then Giganta, of course, does what Giganta does, grows up and just smashes her into the ground. And then as she starts to try to crawl away, does it again. And as she is about to go for the third time, we see a knife come out of the dust cloud, explodes in her eye. And he's like, oh, geez, Pandora's really capable of taking us all out. So then Vandal Savage comes in and is ready to fight. Signal Man's just throwing out all these statistics of like, she has some kind of mystic energy and she's ignoring all of these injuries she has because she's that good. So Vandal Savage starts fighting against Pandora. It's a pretty even fight, all things considered, until eventually Pandora pins down Savage and he basically holds a gun to his head and he's like, you won't do it. You don't have the guts. And she's like, try me. Blows his brains out. And Signal Man's like, oh, Jesus, you killed him. That's insane. But of course, he's Vandal Savage. He immediately fixes himself. He gets up and he grabs Pandora and just be like, psh, you know, I was willing to just let you leave before, but now you've outrun my sympathy. So you're going to give me that box or I will destroy you. And Pandora's like, yeah, that was my plan too. You know, maybe we should talk before we start punching each other. That seems like a good idea. But regardless, her plan is, Vandal Savage, I've seen you throughout the years. You've always been a prick. So I figured that you might be able to open this box. So here you go. And Vandal goes to open the box. But of course, he is not purely dark of heart. So it blasts him away. And she's like, psh, you still have a conscience, you pansy. And he's like, I didn't mean it. So she just leaves because screw it. Vandal's a bit upset by the fact that he's not pure evil. But then we see back at the Argus field office, the Shade agent is also there, and it turns out this is now an interdepartmental job. It involves metas and parahumans, so they're both in on it, and they're like, all right, so what do you know about Pandora? And it's like, oh yeah, she's this mythical figure, blah, blah, blah. They go through the whole thing. And basically, the Argus agent has the full story saying, like, now she may or may not be the one, but regardless, she's real. There have been sightings of her, and she's somehow involved in this. So right now, Pandora is target number one of both of our agents, and we got to take her out. So both Argus and Shade are after Pandora. Pandora has decided, screw looking for pure of heart, I'm going for darkest of heart, and that seems to be it. She's also really good at fighting. It's fine. It's an okay. I mean, as a tie-in to Trinity War, not great. It doesn't feel like, this feels like its own thing, which it should be. You should not have a tie-in be issue number 2. Like, no, take time to develop your characters first. There was no need for this to be here. Yeah, it's a whatever story. I'm not all that impressed by it, but then again, it's Pandora. I don't think it's possible to be impressed by Pandora. So I'm going to give this one I want to say like a 5.5, but that sounds too harsh because it's not awful. So I will give it a 6, but I refuse to go higher than that. So a 6 for this. We'll see if it improves once it doesn't have to do Trinity War anymore, but not holding my breath. Batman Incorporated number 13, written by Grant Morrison, art by Chris Burnham. This is the final issue of the series, and overall it's pretty basic. So, obviously last issue we had, everything coming to a head, mainly Talia showing up in like almost bat garb coming to fight Batman in the Bat Cave. This issue picks up with Gordon arresting Batman, which, if I remember correctly, was like back in issue 1 or something like that was teased. But he arrests Bruce Wayne, and Gordon's narration is like, yeah, I've known Bruce Wayne for years, like ever since the beginning of my time here in Gotham. He's a good guy. He's a fine guy. I don't see anything wrong with him, but there is some things that we need to talk about. So we see in the interrogation room, and Gordon basically is like, what happened to you? One, why are you so beat up? And he's just like, this is dangerous sports. And he's like, okay, whatever. Secondly, they blew up Wayne Tower. They brainwashed a bunch of kids. What happened? And Bruce Wayne explains, yeah, this is a problem between me and my ex. My ex happens to be Talia al Ghul, and we had a kid together. And immediately Gordon's like, you had a fling with a criminal mastermind? How does Batman feel about that? So then we cut to the continuation of the story where Talia makes her way into the cave and immediately starts stripping off all the bat gear. Like, she's still wearing her jumpsuit, but like, why would you show up if you just immediately take off all the bat stuff? But regardless, he's like, here's the thing. I gave you, and I have to say, this entire fight, while there are actual swords involved, it's mainly just a fight of words, where Talia's whole thing is, I gave you a true enemy, something that wasn't like this tiny little one-person thing that could be killed. I gave you something that is worthy of Batman, and but it's like opposite of you. There's no slogans, there's no symbolisms or anything like that. I already rule the world. This was just making it official. And Batman calls her out for killing their son. And she's like, he was grown in a jar. I could easily make another one. But regardless, they start sword fighting, and then they kiss. And as they kiss, we see all these different fights going on with Batman Incorporated members and members of Leviathan. And we see them going after the cube, the Ouroboros trigger, whatever it's called. And as they split from the kiss, he's like, poison. Luckily, I already took the antidote. And he's like, yeah, sure, I already knew you would have. So anyway, here's the thing. I've told Leviathan that if I don't return, they have to give up everything. Like, if you beat me, you win. But if I leave, then obviously I will take over the world myself. So this fight will literally be the determination of everything. So they get into a sword fight. And it's just like, oh, Wayne, Batman is dead. So they end up fighting. We see that Bruce is saying, like, hey, yeah, no, something happened to my son, and Talia as well. And Gordon's trying to egg him on, like, trying to get an answer for things. But he's like, no, I had 2 holes in my heart when my parents were killed, but I will refuse to let any more hearts form ever again. So regardless, they get into a fight. Their swords literally shatter. And it turns out that Talia laced her sword with a poison that was brand new, so Batman definitely doesn't have an antidote for it. He's like, oh, yes, I'm sorry I couldn't love you the way that you wanted me to. And so he starts succumbing to the poison, and she's like, all right, well, I'm sure something's going to save you in the nick of time. Something always does. And wouldn't you know it, what was his name? Wingman, that was it. Wingman, aka Jason Todd, comes in saying, like, hey, Talia, I got the cube, I got the trigger. You free him, you give him the antidote, and I'll give it to you. And so she gives Batman the antidote and then hands over the trigger, and she goes and she presses it, and she's like, oh, this is the end of things, bleep. And then Jason reveals, like, yeah, I mean, that is the trigger, and it still did trigger, but we took down your entire network. Like, Batman Incorporated just did overtime to get rid of all the bombs in all the cities. And the only reason I gave this to you was because I owe you for, bringing me back to life and whatnot. But now I'm owing you by telling you, you gotta run, because we're gonna come after you. And Talia's like, run? How dare you think I'll run? And Batman takes the answer, and he gets back up, and he's like, ah, yes, we've stopped you. Next time you want to work with some weird Nazi scientist, think twice. And Talia's like, oh my God, listen to you guys. You're patronizing me. Do you honestly think this is over? Like, your Jokers and your Riddlers, they keep coming back. What makes you think I'm any different? I'm going to come up with some better plan, and I'm going to best you. It's all just a matter of time. You should have killed me when you had the chance. And as she says that, she looks up where Batman and Wingman are looking up to at this point, and there's a woman with a golden gun who shoots Talia in the head. And it turns out this is Kathy Kane. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Kathy Kane, in original continuity, pre-New 52, was the first Batwoman. But here, she is the head of the organization Spiral. And Batman's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're even alive. And she's like, I'm not. Don't come after me, Bruce. I'm not even here. So she disappears, and she's gone. And Gordon's basically like, okay, look, no one's seen Batman for days. Is he retired? And he's like, I don't know. You got to ask Batman that. And he's like, all right. Well, here's the thing. You were funding him, and he did some illegal stuff, so you are still technically liable for something, so we're going to keep you here for a while. But then all of a sudden, someone comes in and posts bail for him, and it's just like, okay, never mind. Guess you're fine. Have a nice day, Mr. Wayne. So he makes his way out. He references 0 year because editorial wouldn't let him get away with not doing that. And he's like, yes, I'll tell Batman to give you a call. And then Gordon shows his little Batman tie clip. And he's like, oh, don't worry. I think he'll get the message. So at that point, Alfred is waiting for Bruce outside the police station and says, like, sir, there's something you need to see back at home. And when they arrive, they see the 2 graves of Martha and Thomas Wayne have been dug up and the bodies are gone. So Bruce goes down into his cave, becomes Batman, and he continues to fight. And we get the narration here of all I need to know is this: Batman always comes back bigger and better, shiny and new. Batman never dies, never ends, and it probably never will. So that's the thing you get. And we see an epilogue where Ra's al Ghul, not having access to Lazarus Pit, is currently draining the blood of Lord Deadman, because I guess he has some Lazarus in his body. And he makes his way into a secret room and he says, Batman, you detective, you killed my daughter. You allowed my grandson to die. I will hound you to the end of the earth. Sons of Batman rise, as he makes his way into a room with a whole bunch of what seem to be clone Damians, all growing in vats. That's the issue. That's the end of Batman Incorporated, except for a special, which is coming out next month, which we will get to. But here's the thing. I said this since the beginning. This series never did a good job of explaining things to people who weren't around for the pre-New 52 stuff. This picked up directly from Grant Morrison's run that he was doing on Batman before all of this, going into Final Crisis and all that stuff. And I never feel like through the issues we got post New 52, a good explanation of the things that happened beforehand. As for that, that's going to handicap the total score that I can really give this, because it doesn't feel like a satisfying ending, because it didn't feel like it had satisfying build-up. Yes, Leviathan was clearly a threat, but I didn't ever feel like I got the full grasp of what they were doing, because I never saw that. I never got to see them. Like, they were talking about this Nazi Otto Netz. I have no idea who the hell that is. I have never met that character. When Kathy Kane shows up in this, is that a surprise? Have we already been introduced to the idea that she's been around? Batman says Bronze Tiger killed her. When was that? I don't know. It didn't do a good job of explaining that. As for this issue, it's an interesting enough, like, yes, Batman will always be around. Yeah, we've seen that ending before. It's not an awful ending, but it didn't quite hit as hard as I think it really should have, because I didn't feel like it built it up enough from what I was able to read. So I can't hold it against this issue too much, as obviously there are people who did read all of Grant Morrison's run. Maybe it works better in that regard. It just didn't for me. But I'm going to give this one in total like a 6.5. It's good. It's a fine enough issue, but it just really feels like it fell down, especially in the fact that it was told after the fact. And even then, with the Martha and Thomas Wayne's being dug up, it kind of feels like that last page of Batman going around doing things with the narration was supposed to be clearing that up, but I'm not sure. So I don't even know if I'm supposed to be expecting this elsewhere. So overall, yeah, 6.5, Batman Incorporated, kind of out on a whimper. Superboy number 22, written by Justin Jordan, art by Guilherme Balbi on art. So, last that I remember, we had Superboy teaming up with Dr. Psycho in order to hunt down members of Hive and stop them, I guess. So we pick up in New York with Jocelyn Lore trying to break into Superboy's apartment because she's just trying to get in contact with him because he might be destroying the future. And as she kicks in the apartment door, all of his stuff is under like dust rags and he's nowhere to be found. Turns out he's in Queens going to high school. That's right, we got Superboy in high school. And as he's going up there, he's mentally talking with Dr. Psycho, who's hanging out with Crypto, and basically saying, okay, some weird stuff's going on at this hospital, or this high school. A couple of people have had to go to the hospital because they just start freaking out from like psychic visions and stuff like that. It's been 6 within the past like few weeks, so therefore this is a trend. We got to go in there and figure out what psychically is causing this, because either it's Hive or they're going to be on their way soon afterwards. So he walks in. Immediately, he meets a blonde-haired girl named Elizabeth Cooper. And Elizabeth Cooper's like, hey, I'll show you around. But then this other guy like taps him on the shoulder and he freaks out for a second. And he's like, hey, no, sorry, I just wanted to introduce you to school. And he says, yeah, well, if you need anything, I'm Mr. Levine, the guidance counselor. You know where to find me. And he's like, actually, I don't. Do you have a map or something? And then all of a sudden 3 girls, including Elizabeth Cooper, come up and say, I can show you around. And he picks one of them called the redhead. And the redhead is about to introduce herself. And she says, and then all of a sudden, this jock shows up saying, hey, man, you hitting on my girl? And he's like, what? No, your girl started talking to me. And he's like, yeah, don't worry. Coop's just trying to make me jealous. So now I really want you to pause there for a second. And I know I'm getting nitpicky, but like this red-haired girl was just called Coop, a.k.a. Elizabeth Cooper. Whereas we just saw on the last page that Elizabeth Cooper is a blonde-haired girl. They lost track of their characters between one page. It gets worse. So the jock comes in and like tries to start fighting Superboy, but of course he's Superboy, so he fakes as if he got punched into a nearby locker, and then he uses his TK powers to drop the bully's pants. And everyone starts laughing at him. He's like, oh, come on, guys. You've seen boxers before. And then the blonde-haired girl comes up and says, psh, that guy's just a jerk. To the bully, he's saying, psh, that guy's just a jerk. Don't worry about him, baby. And walks off with the bully. Meaning that was now the girlfriend. How do you lose track of your characters within one page? I don't understand this. Regardless, after this point, it gets really stupidly easy. So this other like goth girl shows up and she's like, oh yeah, no, my name's Eliza Ellis. You're already a pariah because you just mess with the popular kids. And Superboy's like, what? I don't even know what's up. I didn't even like them. And it's like, yeah, no one does. That's why they're popular. So she starts explaining like, oh, well, where did you come from? Have you ever been to high school before? And he's like, no, I haven't. My parents are dead and I'm from Kansas. And as he's walking through, he sees one of these kids has like a weird lizard-looking face. He freaks out for a second, and then all of a sudden it changes back to normal. So who knows what that was. But regardless, they go into a history class. The history teacher says something about how, manifest destiny of America or whatnot. And Connor speaks up and says, like, that's not how it happened. Here's how it happened. And so the teacher sends him to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor says, hey man, you got to behave or else we're going to have to send you to the principal. He gets sent to the principal. Principal says, hey, you got to behave or else we're going to have to send you to the superintendent. Superintendent's like, this isn't even my job, man. Go back to class and stop being an ass. And so Connor's like, all right, well, I guess I'm back in class a week later and I don't even know what just happened. So then all of a sudden, one of the bully kids, or popular kid, I should say, starts freaking out. He thinks somebody's coming after him. Connor jumps in to try to restrain him. And as he does so, Dr. Psycho's on the line. He's just like, oh, yeah, no, something's going on. What's up? So he manages to get the guy down. And as he does so, everyone's staring at him like, what did you do to him? You took down Chris, whatever his name was. And he's like, what are you talking? Dude, he was freaking out on everybody. How am I the one who's weird in this situation? And Eliza's like, welcome to high school. So they take the kid out on a stretcher. Dr. Psycho's now showing up as an astral projection that Superboy's able to see. And he's like, wait a minute, you could see me? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh, that's weird. Anyway, yeah, no, that was definitely a psionic attack, but I don't know what it is, which means Hive is going to come after this because it clearly isn't Hive already. So at that point, he comes up to Eliza and is basically saying like, hey, so what happened to that kid? And he's like, I don't know, something that happened to a bunch of kids recently. We don't know what's going on with it. But we're not that broken up about it because it's the popular kids. And so Superboy comes out and being like, okay, I don't understand. Why is it that like some of them are okay to not be okay with? And he's like, well, because they're treating you like crap. So isn't it fine for us to treat them like crap? And he's like, I don't know. That seems a bit weird. But either way, Eliza walks off and says, so ask me again why I don't feel bad when one of them gets treated like us. Either you're a cool kid, a weird kid, or just one of the kids. No one sees kids are monsters, including you, including me. And as he reaches out to her, all of them have snake faces and they're all monsters. And so he's about to launch an attack against them, but then he gets jumped by a dog and it starts attacking him. But it turns out this dog is Crypto. He's like, oh, they've infected one of my own. So that's that. I'm still just kind of trapped on the fact that they managed to forget a character that was just there over one page. Like, it's both a writing mistake and an art mistake at the same time. Like, there's no way around that. It's just, this is so poor a written book. And the fact that, like, 6 different pages in this book just basically say the phrase, that's high school, which, no, that's not, like, that is the CW's version of high school. That is, like, Riverdale or whatever crap is currently on their channel. Like, reading this issue made me angry. It made me upset to read it. It was not well written. It was actually just, like, it felt like from page to page we were just forgetting things. And, like, that's a problem I've had with every Scott Lobdell issue I've read in the past year. It's not okay. It's just not. So I have to give this a low rating. But, like, it's a 1. Like, looking at my rating scale, I have a 1 listed as no redeeming qualities. And I can't think of a single thing in this issue that I would say is redeeming quality. It's just not good. The only thing that gets at that 1 point is that the art is not the worst, but it's still not something I enjoy. It's not a great art style. So yeah, screw this book, man. Red Lanterns number 22, written by Charles Soule, art by Alessandro Vitti. So last issue, Guy managed to beat down Atrocitus and steal his ring and became a Red Lantern himself. And this issue, he has to deal with the fact that all the Red Lanterns are just mindless rage machines. So he's just puking up blood and screaming. And everyone's looking at him. All the sentient Red Lanterns are like, so what do we do with him? Should we drop him in the lake? And Bleez is like, no, we're not going to drop him in the lake. What are you talking about? And they start fighting amongst themselves. They're like, no, he killed Atrocitus. That's blasphemy. Atrocitus was our leader. And it's like, yeah, but if Atrocitus wasn't able to fight back, then shouldn't we just have the most powerful leader? And so some of them are saying Guy should be the leader. Some of them are saying Atrocitus needs to come back. Bleez is, of course, vying for herself. She's like, now hold the phone. I think that I should be leader, and that's because, screw it. Why not? Should be me. And everyone's just going up against each other. And finally, Rancor, who's not following any of this. He talks to Zilius Ox, and he's like, I'm sorry, what's going on? And Zilius explains the whole situation. And just be like, okay, but why is Guy acting like that? Why is he so weird? And it's like, oh, well, when you put on a Red Lantern ring, you're kind of mindless. You don't really have anything. If we dip you in the blood lake, then you gain sentience. And that's something we're debating about doing right now. And Bleez is like, but we're not going to do that because look at that power. Look at that untapped potential he's got. If we just use him as a weapon instead of letting him think, oh my God, all of our problems are solved. We can just send him in anywhere, and he's just going to act like a nuclear warhead. And as she's explaining all this, as she's saying all this, Rancor just uses this construct to pick up Guy, put him over the lake, and drop him in. And Bleez looks behind as she hears the splash, and he's like, what did you do? I just told you not to do that. And he's like, yeah, I heard you. I don't care. I wouldn't want to be stuck mindless like that. That's awful. Why would we do that to one of our own? So yeah, you want to come at me? Come at me. You know how it went last time. So at that point, Rancor basically lays out the rules of like, look, no matter which of you guys becomes the leader, if it's not Atrocitus, nobody's telling me what to do. I am my own person. I do not see myself as lesser than any of you. So everyone goes off and does their own thing. And Zilius, at one point, he's like, oh, I don't know who elected you, Queen, Bleez. And then Zilius is like, by the way, Rancor, queens aren't elected. So, gotcha. So, Guy pops out of the lake, and Rancor guides him up. He's like, oh, yeah, hey, how's it going? We met once before. He's like, yeah, you're Jack, right? It's like, actually, it's Rancor now. He's like, that's a stupid name. All right, look, tell me what's going on. And he introduced himself to Zilius, and he's like, oh, hey, you look like a testicle with teeth. And he's like, I don't know what a testicle is, but thanks. So they start talking to each other, and turns out Bleez and Scalix are basically debating as to who should be leader, with Bleez just throwing Scalix down into the ground. And Guy chimes in, and he's like, hey, guys, why do we need to have a leader? Like, yeah, no, Atrocitus is gone, but like, do any of you really want a leader? I mean, what are we, Green Lanterns? And Bleez is like, okay, so then who determines who we kill or like how we should govern our affairs? And she like pokes his finger in his face, and he just takes her down, just be like, if you keep your bone wings, you're going to keep that out of my face. You got that? But anyway, no, here's the thing. You guys think you need a leader. Why not just have everything be a democracy? Just all of us vote on things we want to do, and whatever wins out is what we do. I mean, this place sucks. Look at this planet. Where do you guys even sleep? And it's like, oh, we sleep on the dirt. It's like, was that Atrocitus' idea? Yeah, he said it would make us angrier. It's like, yeah, I'm angry just thinking about it. Look, who thinks, let's just put this little voting thing to a test right now. Who thinks we should sleep in a better place? And everyone raises their hands. Just like, great, cool, I've got an idea. So they go out into space, and they find this fleet of pirate ship vessels. And immediately they all start getting blown up one after another. And we see that it is the Red Lanterns. They've arrived. And Guy explains, like, here's the thing. We're going to go onto this ship, and we're just going to start taking people out, and we're going to take this ship as our own. And they're like, but whose ship is this? And it's like, he's a well-known pirate. Green Lanterns have been after him forever. We just got lucky and ran into him now. And it's like, oh, cool. So we can kill him then. And he's like, no, I wouldn't suggest killing. Don't kill. As much as you can handle it, don't do that. That's still a no-no. So They start making their way through the decks. They're attacking as many people as they can find, just taking them all out. And they make their way into this storage container, Guy and Zilius do. And they come across a room with a bunch of like crystalline spheres. And he's like, hey, that looks like one of those Green Lanterns. What's his name? He's like, oh, it's Chassalon. And this is his species. They've cut off all of their limbs and are using their bodies as like an aphrodisiac. And it's like, oh, geez, that's dark even for me. And Guy starts getting really, really pissed off. And he goes and finds the captain of the ship. And the captain's like, whoa, dude, whatever I did to piss you off, I can fix it, man. Just money, whatever it is, I can fix it. And Guy's like, nah, you really can't. And he straight up murders this guy. And Guy sits himself down and he like blasts him out the front window. So Guy plants himself in the captain's chair with just all the air rushing out around him. Rancor makes a construct to repair the ship, and he's like, is it just me, or did that feel great? So we see Guy is falling a little bit, but then we cut to deep space where Dexstar has taken Atrocitus, and he uses his ring to restart Atrocitus's heart and bring him back to life. So Atrocitus is neither dead nor buried. He is still alive out in deep space with his super loyal kitty. I like it. I think it's a solid change of pace. It would be weird, the fact if Guy just took control of the Red Lantern so soon after joining it. I like the fact that he put out there like, no, let's just vote on things. And he manages to get himself a little bit of a better view because he suggested this thing that everybody wanted and yet nobody was doing. So I like this. It's like a slow-moving sort of political game where I'm curious to see how long this is going to stay. Obviously, Atrocitus still being alive puts a major damper on things, but I'm interested. I'm super into this run so far. It's very interesting. So overall, I'd say this one is probably I'm going to give it an 8. It's almost a 7.5, but just those last few pages of Guy just realizing how messed up these guys are and giving in to his anger, I really like that. It gives a bit more characterization that they could have made Guy just, oh no, we're still not going to kill, but like, no, he's willing to kill now. He's willing to cross that line. So it lends a little bit extra to that. So yeah, 8 for this. Looking forward to how it continues. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this July 31st, 2013. But of course, we aren't done. It's the 100th episode. You think we're just going to wrap up like that? I mean, I would, usually. I actually don't have a problem with that. But this happens to be a 5th week. So we have a bunch of backups that we need to get through. Now, for those of you unaware, because, hey, maybe you decided that 100 is a good jumping on point, backups are stories that come at the back of larger comics that typically don't have anything to do with the comic that came before it. Not always true, but usually true. And I choose not to cover those during the time where I'm talking about the comic itself and just shove them all into this 5th week because usually they're lighter. Of course, not always, but usually they are. So, in terms of backups that came out this week, let me just walk you through a couple of them. We have backup stories from Batman, Detective Comics, Action Comics, and kind of a little bit of Superman, The Flash, Justice League of America, and All-Star Western. So just one or two things I want to point out here. I am technically covering backup stories from Batman and Action Comics issues 23, which I have not actually covered yet, but that's only because it's part of a larger story, or it just makes sense to do it now rather than just barely cover it when it comes to next time that I happen to get a 5th week. It just makes sense to happen now. However, another one that people may or may not know about is Threshold. Threshold has had a backup story of Larfleeze throughout its first 5 issues, and we just covered issue 7 in the show. Now, it still has a backup story, and I would be covering it. However, Threshold was canceled at issue 8, and the backup story actually ties into what happens in the main story pretty heavily. So I'm going to hold off on doing the backup story until Threshold issue 8 comes out. So I'm actually going to cover that in 2 episodes, episode 102. I'm not going to wait for the 5th week because that's not going to be until October. So it just makes sense to cover it in 2 weeks' time. I know I make the rules, and I know I make this confusing, but just trust me, it's better this way. So, with all that said and done, let's just jump into the backup stories, pretty much in the same order we did the rest of the show, with, as always, Batman. Where the hell did he learn to drive? That One Time and The Pit, all backup stories to Batman's issues 21, 22, and 23. Writers are Scot, Snyder, and James Tynion IV. Art is Rafael Albuquerque. So all of these are just stories of, hey, Bruce went around the world, did some training. What did he do? What was he up to? So first one we got is Where the Hell Did He Learn to Drive? Where we're in Rio de Janeiro. Bruce is 19, and he's outrunning the police along with a guy named Miguel. And Miguel apparently is this known crime boss, and he's telling Bruce, like, oh yeah, keep it up, do a good job. And Bruce is like, Miguel, all the cars you had me practice in were very gray and dull and able to blend into the environment. We're currently driving a pink sports car through the streets of Rio. There's no way I'm going to be able to escape. And Miguel points out, like, yeah, that's kind of the thing. Like, whenever you're using your talents that I taught you, yeah, you can probably escape, but you need to understand the power of flashiness, that if you put on a good enough show for these people, they're going to let you go because they're secretly egging you on. They want you to escape. And we see that hooked up to this guy's car is a grappling hook that he uses to make a super tight corner that the cops can't make it around. And he's like, yeah, see, they'll just let you on through. And we see that as they make this corner, a couple other police cars are there waiting. Miguel pulls out a bazooka who's about to blow him away. That, of course, is not cool with Bruce. So he suddenly turns the car, causes Miguel to drop his bazooka, and he's like, what are you doing? This isn't the rules I taught you. And he's like, yeah, I'm more of an improviser. And he drives his way into a museum and drives up some stairs and manages to get them lodged inside of the staircase. And Miguel's like, you idiot, you got us trapped. I've never been trapped in my life. This is all your fault. And Bruce just slugs him in the face and says, hey, Miguel, you have killed 23 police officers over the last 3 years. I'm going to let the police take care of you now. Thanks for the tips on driving. And so he leaves the museum and gets on his way. Then we go to That One Time, which is issue 22's backup story. We see Bruce Wayne is lighting a match, and he is in a room that is very quickly filling up with sand. And he's like, oh, geez, this isn't good. So we then cut back to before, where Bruce is, he's working with a scientist named, I'm not even sure they give him a name, but he's working with a scientist who's got like a robot monkey. And he's working on all these gizmos and gadgets, and the scientist is like, now, Bruce, you've been tinkering for so long. Are you sure you have everything you need? And Bruce is like, yeah, no, you told me that my final test was I was going to be locked in a room with limited air with only the inventions that I've made in the past 6 months of working with you. I've accounted for every possibility. There's no way you're going to be able to get one up on me. And then we see Bruce inside this room. All of his tech has been smashed. All of it is broken. And he has nothing but his broken tech and a box of matches. So he's sitting there thinking like, oh, what should I do? How am I supposed to get out of this? There's no way to do this. And he thinks back to what his mentor said, saying like, oh, you have to learn the impossible. You need to learn to be flexible with your ideas. And so Bruce looks at his stuff that he has there, and he starts thinking through the blueprints that he had, and he said, oh, I got something all right. So upstairs, the scientist is just sitting there sharing a drink with his robot monkey, and Bruce suddenly breaks through the ground and crawls out from the crypt, and he's like, oh yeah, I took all of these different pieces of tech and I managed to jerry-rig this sonic amplifying blast that managed to break through the ground. And the scientist is like, now, wasn't that exciting? And he's like, dying? No, that sucked. And he's like, no. The moment where you managed to figure it out, where you managed to come up with something new that has never been done before. And he's like, yeah, no, that was great. And the scientist tells him, that's what you're going to need. You're going to need to be flexible. You need to be able to find that way out no matter what. And it turns out that this crypt he was kept in was underneath the Sphinx, because that's where people learned that they had to be flexible. So, yeah. Then we had the backup to issue number 23 called The Pit, where we are in northeast Norway, and there's a fight pit going on. And the rules of the pit are that a combatant is in there, and every hour on the hour they add another combatant in there, but they've since run out of fighters because it's been 28 hours, and Bruce has not managed to go down, but he also refuses to kill any of the other fighters. So we see the woman who's taught him here. She has a name, but I can't call it out by now. She's like, yeah, no, you need to learn the lesson here, Bruce. If you want this to stop, you need to start killing these people, because no matter what, you are trying to wage a war, and you won't win a war by letting people live. And so these fighters go in, they keep on attacking Bruce. She throws down a spear so that Bruce can do what is necessary. He snaps the pointy end off, leaving just a bow staff, and he says, all right, come on. And he goes and he fights against these 28 trained killers, and he takes them all down. And the woman's like, okay, it's time, send another man in. And everyone just backs up. No one wants to go in with him. They all think he's some sort of demon or a monster or something. So everyone refuses to fight him, and Bruce manages to win just by fear alone. And so that is the pit. Yeah, all three of these stories are good. All of them are great. I love the art style in all of them. I do like how they add in these little... First story is about the theatricality. Second story is about his ingenuity. And the third story is about how he doesn't have to corrupt his own morals to instill fear into others. It's basically just the intro to Batman Begins, but told in its own separate way. So I think it's good. I think it's a solid little three-part story there. All in all, I mean, do I think it fits in with like what the 0 Year stuff is doing? Vaguely, in that obviously this is his training period before he comes back to Gotham. But honestly, you could have these stories at any point, and I think they really would slot in. So not critical to being tied into 0 Year. All that in mind, I'm going to give this collection, all three of them, because they do really come as a group. I'm going to give this 7.5 collectively. I think they're good. I think they're solid. I do think that they get better with each one. I think that it increases over time in quality, but I don't think that that's intentional. I think it was just the way the story shook out. So yeah, into it. Territorial and My Better Half. These are the backup stories to Detective Comics 21 and 22, and they are written by John Layman, art by Andy Clark. So this is following Man-Bat. If you remember, back in issue, I think it was 19, I could be wrong, we were introduced to Kirk Langstrom, who took Man-Bat serum, and then in a later backup story, we saw that Francine Langstrom, his wife, also took the serum. So this is Territorial. We open up with Man-Bat tearing a guy to shreds, and he's like, I didn't do that. It wasn't me. I know it wasn't me. I didn't do that at all. And we then pick up what I guess is the next morning, and they're just drinking coffee. Francine is doing whatever, and they're hearing on the news that there is a homeless man who was found mutilated underneath this bridge. And Kirk hears this, and he's like, oh, crap. I have to go run some errands. And so he runs out to find the police at the bridge. And when he gets there, everyone's looking down at the crime scene, but he decides to look up. And underneath the bridge, he sees a whole bunch of bats there. And he knows this because the nights where he becomes Man-Bat, this is where he nests. And so he explains briefly, he's like, yeah, no, I'm Kirk Langstrom. When my wife took the serum, we both woke up there, and we realized, oh, this serum, it just burns through you, and then you turn back to normal. It's a temporary thing. You have to keep on re-upping if you want to do that. And obviously, Francine did not continue to do that. After that incident, their marriage kind of started falling apart a little bit. They didn't talk as much because it was clearly traumatizing to her. But Kirk got addicted to it, and he started taking it night after night. And so he kept on finding himself transforming into Man-Bat and going out hunting. And it wasn't always hunting people. We see that he goes out and he finds a huge dog that goes and attacks him, and he quote-unquote defends himself, but kills the dog in the process. And when he wakes up the next morning, he's like, oh, wait, hold on, that's right, dog. It's one of those mutant dogs that I remember, I think it was Detective Comics 18, or was it Batman 18? Regardless, Batman battles some giant mutated dogs, and this was one of those. And he was like, well, I mean, it's not the worst thing I could have killed. Yeah, it didn't hurt anybody. I think that was a win. So he gets back home in time for breakfast, and he turns on the news, and the news is talking about how Batman fought against Mad Hatter. And he's like, yeah, but I'm not interested in that story. I'm interested in the one that comes afterwards. So then they say, the dog was found mutilated, but it was only lost just that next afternoon, like just the afternoon beforehand when he was becoming Man-Bat. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on. If that means that that guy from the day before was not killed by that dog, that's what he was trying to logic out, that that dog was the one who killed the guy, and he was just getting revenge for the guy. But no, somehow this other guy died. And Kirk's like, oh God, is it me? So then issue 22 has a backup story in it called My Better Half. And we see that Kirk has made the transition just while he's walking down the street into Man-Bat. And he seemingly attacks a random man on the street, but we never really get back to that. So we see Kirk basically, he doesn't have to take the serum anymore. He's taken enough. He starts transforming on his own, and he realizes, oh crap, I'm in over my head on this one. So he dumps all the rest of the serum, but he's like, you know, I still really like the idea of flying and freedom. It feels so good when I transform, but I know that I keep on attacking people, and that is a problem. And he looks around the lab. He sees his wife, like, basically ignoring him, not talking to him anymore. And it's like, oh, yeah, you know, she only took the serum once, but this is clearly something that got to her. And I know I had an addiction, but, like, what did it do to my body? And he starts investigating himself. And then all of a sudden, as he's in the lab, he starts, like, transforming slightly, but it passes. His colleagues notice, and he's like, hey, you all right, Kirk? And then all of a sudden, Harvey Bullock shows up. And he's like, hey, Kirk Langstrom, here's the thing. I need you down at the station. And he pulls him in, and he lays out all the evidence of, like, all these people here, as far as our autopsy can confirm, were killed by a giant bat. And so we pulled in a guy who's an expert on bats, wink, wink, and he confirms that. So you were the guy who made Man-Bat serum. I'm going to need your alibi for all the nights these people were killed. And Harvey walks out of the room for a second to let him sweat. And Kirk is indeed sweating. He's like, oh God, I'm going to have to transform to get out of this. I'm going to have to go on the run. Everything's crashing down around me. This is it. And then all of a sudden Harvey enters back in, and he's like, hey, you're free to go. Turns out your wife showed up, and she provided an alibi for all of those nights. And we see that the Francine and Kirk leave arm in arm, and Francine says, oh, don't worry, honey, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. And that's when Kirk finally pieces it all together. He goes back down to the lab again that night, just as himself, not as Man-Bat, and he goes this time to Francine's files, where it turns out that she has recreated the Man-Bat serum, and she has essentially changed it slightly, using a different breed of bat, one that is highly aggressive and vampiric. And we see the final shot is Francine holding her own version of the serum. So Francine's evil, quote unquote. It seems to me that combining these two stories together is that Francine has been taking the serum herself, and she's been killing people. And that's why Man-Bat doesn't think he's been doing it, but it seems like it's actually her as Woman-Bat. So it's a nice little story. I'm interested in it. It's kind of like a little whodunit, but with like monsters. So yeah, it's intriguing. I'm into it. Art-wise, looks great. I really do like Andy Clark's style. Yeah, no, I don't have any real problems with this. It's the only thing that's holding it back from like a really, really high rating is the fact that it is just essentially one issue long. It's just a tiny little short thing. I do think there's one more part to this, which all in all, I probably should have covered in this section, but we will deal with it next time we have a fifth week. But overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 7. I'm liking it, but I really can't give it too much because it is still just a backup story. It's just, in its very nature, it is smaller and lesser. So I'm liking it. I would have liked to see it be a full thing, but for what it is, it's a 7. The World of Krypton, written by Scott Lobdell and Frank Hanna, art by Philip Tan and Tom Darenick. This is the backup story to Action Comics 20 through 23, as well as Superman Annual number 2. And it is essentially just, here's how Jor-El and Lara and Zod kind of all met and all that stuff. So I'm not going to break this up into which issues had specifically which, because it is just one continuous story, but we open up with Jor-El. He is with his science team or whatever, and they're underwater in Krypton. And they basically just discovered Kryptonian Atlantis. It's an ancient city that was sunken and has a whole bunch of technological advances and stuff. So Jor-El's getting a call from the Science Council saying, hey, we've got a meeting. We need you here. Like, can you get up here? And he's like, no, I am way too interested in this. And as they approach it, they see that there is an animal species called Teclons, which just look like angry dragon things. And they start approaching. And Jor-El's like, nobody move. Nobody spook them. It'll all be good. Anyway, yeah, I'm not going to be able to make it up to the council. Bye. Click. So then we see inside the council. I'm not sure this guy even has a name. Sorry, Krahu. Sure. So Krahu's looking disappointed. And we see that he's standing with two guards of the Kryptonian military, Lara Lorvan and Jaxer. And those two are apparently either dating or engaged or something. But Lara's really pissed off that Jor-El didn't make it. He's just like, oh, this guy. Oh, we need him here. And he's off doing stupid little field trips. And Jaxer's like, I think the lady doth protest too much. And she's like, shut up. So they make their way to the Science Council. And the Science Council is basically like, yeah, no, on the agenda, we listed this as like exploratory budget meeting or something like that. But we lied so that the military wouldn't really know about this, because what we've noticed is that there's messages about a coup overriding the Science Council. And we need to bring this up to everyone here. And then all of a sudden the colonel shows up, and he gets a name eventually. And he takes Laura's sidearm and says like, give me your gun. And she's like, oh, yes, sir. And then he just walks up and immediately kills the head of the Science Council. And so Laura then starts attacking the colonel, being like, what have you done? And he's just like, oh, I'm protecting Krypton. You have no idea what these assholes have done. Okay, they're evil. They're bad people. And Laura's like, no, you swore. Like, this is not how you protect them. And he's just like, no. Krypton has been brought down into mediocrity with all this science stuff. We need to be the proud, like, militaristic people we once were. And we see Laura's about to try to blast her colonel, but then Jaxer comes up behind her and is just like, hey, Laura, you got to go with this, please. Just hear me out. You have to continue with this. And he's unwilling to explain. He just says you got to trust the colonel. And so the colonel starts speaking out to the crowd as Laura's in the background, like, this isn't what we signed up for. This isn't right. And Jaxer's like, oh, please, you got, like, come on, man. I don't want you to be, like, against the crowd here. And so she punches Jaxer in the throat, takes his gun, and then uses her suit to essentially fly out of the building, but it's actually just a really big jump. So she jumps out of there, and she's like, who can she trust now? What people should she possibly turn to? And so we got back underwater to Jor-El, and he's still trying to investigate the city when all of a sudden the military arrive, and it's just like, Jor-El, you're under arrest. And he's like, what? I've been down here the whole time. What are you talking about? I couldn't have done anything. And so at that point, Jor-El's like, well, something seems off here. Something seems fishy, pardon my pun. So he does the self-launch thing in his scuba suit, and it very quickly pushes away the guards that were after him and launches him up to the surface. It spooks the Teclons, which attack the guards, and all the scientists try to make their way up to the surface. But Jor-El's out of his suit, so he might not make it. So then we follow Krahu, was that it? And a bunch of other scientists who are being held captive by the colonel. I still don't think we know his name. But regardless, they walk towards this thing that's part of the power grid. And he's like, yes, this power grid, it's something important. Tell me what it means. And all the scientists are like, well, it's just part of the power grid. I don't know what you're talking about. And the colonel starts blasting their heads off until finally Krahu's like, wait, I'll tell you. I know what's up. It's called a sensory harmonic resonator. I don't know what it is. That's what it's called, though. Jor-El's the one who built it. And he's like, well, here's what I know about it. This thing has been manipulating the emotions of the people on Krypton so that they don't ever feel like upset or angry or anything like that. They just focus on self-betterment, and that makes me sick. So Jor-El and his crew get up to the surface. Immediately, the rest of the military is there. They blast away his friends, and they're about to kill Jor-El when all of a sudden Lara comes in and blasts all of them. And she's like, hey, get on the boat. We got a lot to talk about. And he knows that she hates him and all the science police people. And she's like, oh, yeah, so you got a bone to pick with me? Why are you even doing this? And she's like, look, there's some bad stuff going on. I don't know. I just know that you're the only person here who isn't, definitely is not corrupt. So yeah, you're going to help me out with whatever's going on. And then we cut back to the Colonel, who gives his entire ethos statement here, which is, I'm going to take this device, I'm going to repurpose it to make people only care about the betterment of Krypton through militaristic means, and therefore we will stop Kryptonians from being so, stupid. And he's doing it for, quote, the Eradicator. So we see that Laura and Jor-El have arrived. It's full-on battles in the city. Krahu leads them inside, and as he's trying to lead them through, he explains everything going on. And Jor-El basically says, like, yeah, no, I did make this machine, and it was used to make the people of Krypton docile, but not in a way that's bad. Like, it's a good idea to get people to be introspective. And Laura's like, dude, you're mind controlling these people. And he's like, it's not mind control. Like, mostly. It's a little mind control. And she's like, that's a bad idea. You've made a bad idea here. But they start getting attacked by the military. Laura and Jor-El fight them off with whatever little gadgets they've got. But in the end, it's not enough. And they're brought into the Colonel, which, again, what the hell is his name? So at this point, we see Jor-El gets knocked down. It's just kicked a whole bunch, where Laura is given the chance to basically tell Jaxer, like, hey, look, swear allegiance to the Colonel and the Eradicator thing, and we'll all be good, And she's just like, psh, you're pathetic. I don't know what I ever saw in you. So she still doesn't have any ability to stop Jor-El, or stop the Colonel from using Jor-El. So he's like, all right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to get up there, you're going to take the machine, you're going to use it for my own wills. Got it? Like, that's what I'm going to do. And Jor-El's like, no, this is insane. I refuse. This is madness. And he's like, okay, well, then I'm gonna kill you. And he's like, do what you must. But Krypton is more than just a people, more than just a planet. It's an ideal. And so he goes and he smacks Jor-El. And he is about to execute him, blast his head off, when all of a sudden he gets blasted from behind. And we see this guy comes up and he's like, the Colonel's been neutralized. We've taken care of all the rest of the military who was following him. They were a outspoken minority branch. You don't need to worry about them. And Jor-El's like, thank you, my old friend who's bathed in shadow. And so we see Laura has attacked Jaxer, and Jaxer is like, I love you, Laura. And Laura's like, I thought I loved you as well. So Jor-El says, you must be relieved that, you found out about Jaxer beforehand rather than after your marriage, because, statistically it's just better. And Laura's like, yeah, okay, thanks, regardless. But here's the thing, I still think you're an idiot. So she storms off, and we see Krahu is trying to get the machine back up and running because it was damaged slightly. And Jor-El's like, Krahu, she was right. We are messing with the people's minds. It's a bad idea. We have just one choice. And he takes a glove and he just destroys it. And he's like, yep, there you go. I made a rash decision. It feels pretty good. I think I like it. So then he hears a voice off the side panel from his military friend who was helping him. And he's like, you've saved my life yet again. Thank you so much, Zod. And wouldn't you know it, yep, it's their childhood friends. And they're both working towards the future of Krypton. Huzzah. Overall, I like the story. I think it's a good idea. You can flesh out this backstory, especially before the days of, we've sensed something's wrong with Krypton's core, or whatever it is that caused it. I appreciate going back even further to that and just setting up the friendships, just setting up these things that can be explored more. That being said, I don't think there was much of a real story here. I think that while it has some interesting beats that it nearly hits on, it does feel very surface level throughout. It doesn't feel like we're really able to make any sort of real things about these characters. They all just feel kind of, Jor-El is just this, I won't do the wrong thing because that's wrong. Like, yeah, but can he do anything that just a normal person would do? So, I don't know. I kind of wish we just got a bit more in-depth with it, but it's a good idea on the surface. So overall, I'd say this entire story collectively, it's probably like a 6.5. It's solid. It's a good enough little thing, but it's just missing that extra little oomph that probably could have gotten it a either ongoing backup or an ongoing story within its own right. So I'd say I'd love to see a mini-series about this. So yeah, 6.5. Details. This is the backup story to Flash Annual number 2, written by Nicole Dubrek and art by Cully Hamner. So this opens up 2 years ago. Flash is running around just helping people. It gives like a homeless man a can. He helps a woman catch her bus, saves a kid's dog from traffic. And then we see one guy is like smacking a vending machine trying to get his thing out. Flash pulls it out at super speed, which causes the guy to fall back into a girl, and then they start talking to each other. And he's like, yeah, I'm just making everybody's lives better, one little Flash thing at a time. And he runs to a convenience store. He gets a bottle of wine and gives the guy change, or gives the guy his cash at super speed. And he's like, sir, I need to see your ID. And so Flash just runs off, and he super speeds carrying the wine up to someone's birthday. I forget who. They say who. Forrest. I don't know who this guy is. Regardless, he brings a bottle of wine and says like, here you go, a gift, drink up. So he obviously changes back into Barry at one point. And as Forrest pours the wine, turns out that it's turned. And that's because he was zooming around at super speed and it over-oxidized it. So at that point, we hear a scanner thing go off of there being a huge fire downtown, and so Flash makes an excuse. He leaves, and when he gets there to the fire, someone's crying that their wife and daughter are trapped up inside. And so he runs up inside the building. He finds the daughter and mother. The daughter's okay, but the mother is having trouble breathing. So Flash is like, okay, I'll get her downstairs immediately. And so he takes her down, and they put the gas mask on, but unfortunately, it's too late. The mother inhaled too much carbon monoxide, and she was gone well before Flash even got there. And he's upset about this, but not as upset as the husband, who starts like really freaking out as they announce the death of his wife. So Flash is like, I just wish there had been more time. And so he leaves, and he's like, yeah, no, it's hard to accept when this stuff happens, but you just have to move forward and do your best to be part of this bigger, unpredictable whole. So then we cut to present day, and Patty and Barry are just, having some breakfast, when all of a sudden on the TV, a man is currently threatening to blow up a building. He has a detonation switch in his hand, and he's only going to stop if Flash comes and talks to him. So Barry gets dressed, and Patty's like, do you know this guy? He's like, yeah, I kind of. He was like 2 years ago. I got to go talk to him. Turned out it's the husband from before, and it's in the same building that has been repaired and rebuilt since then. So Flash talks to the cops, and they're like, yeah, we've got bomb-sniffing dogs and robots and stuff, but it's a big building, and we may not have enough time if you don't talk him down. So he goes inside. He immediately finds the bomb and disassembles it. And he's like, cool, now I can just talk to this guy. So he goes up on the roof, and he's like, all these people think that they can depend on you, but you couldn't even save a woman from a fire. And so what is that? And he's just like, dude, your wife was dead beforehand. There was nothing I could do about it. And she wouldn't want you to be like this. She wants you to be able to be better than that. And you should be causing other people harm in your grief. And we see that apparently what happened was, what's his name? Dalton, the husband. He fell asleep with a lit cigarette. So it's actually his fault that the fire started, but nobody knows that. And he's like, you know what? You made your choice, Flash. You couldn't save her, and now you can't save me. And he presses the button. And of course the bombs don't go off, and Flash is like, haha, I've disabled it. But this wasn't a detonation switch. This was an injection, and he's injected himself with cyanide. So he grabs the guy, runs him downstairs as soon as he realizes it. And they do have a little antidote thing that might work, but it may not have time to bind in time. So Flash takes the guy's body and just like shakes it up, trying to super speed the antidote throughout. And it is just enough to save his life. And the daughter, who is now a paramedic, is like, she's here, and she just chews out her dad, just being like, Dad, how could you do this? Like, this is not what Mom would have wanted for you. Don't pretend this is for her. This is only for you. And he's like, I'm sorry. Also, yes, there were also explosives. And Flash is like, don't worry. I'm sorry, did you say explosives plural? Oh, geez. And then all of a sudden, the guy comes out of the building with the bomb-sniffing dog, and he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. Honey here picked up the scent of the bomb. It's all good, and we took care of it. So bombs are defused, and everything is fine. And then we see that all of those people that, Flash saved in the first part of the story have played little parts here in how they've managed to help this story. For instance, Honey was one of the puppies of the dog that Barry saved. So everything works out. It's all part of a larger circle. So at that point, we then see the final panel is Gloria visiting her dad in jail and bringing a photo of her mom, sharing a nice little tender moment. It's a cute little story. It's obviously very self-contained. It doesn't really reference much of anything. And it's just a tiny thing of like, yeah, no, doing these tiny things can be a bigger deal than you think. Like butterfly effect and all that stuff. It really does matter in the end. So I like that as a message. It's a nice little story. Art-wise, it's good. It's just a nice little story all around. I really can't fault it for much of anything. So I'll give this one, I think I'm just going to give it a flat 7, but it is very good. It's just short. It's just a very short little thing. I mean, in total, it's like 6 pages. So very short, but very, very heartfelt and nice feeling. So check it out to get a chance to. The Martian Manhunter. This is the backup story to Justice League of America number 5, written by Matt Kint, art by Manuel Garcia. So we open up on a singular page of Martian Manhunter showing like, yes, I transformed into Catwoman and I took her place in that issue. Ha ha ha. So that was a thing that happened. But then we get back to the main part, where if you remember in the last backups, Martian Manhunter went and he killed a beast monster thing as part of a trial to become leader of their clan group of the Martians. And when he came back, all of the Martians were dead. They were gone. And he recognized that it was something to do with Earth and such, but he didn't have much else to go on. So at this point, he picks it up and he's like, Earth, all right, I'm going to follow this psychic, like, link, fingerprint, whatever you want to call it, and see what's up. And as he approaches Earth, he feels the voice calling out to him. It's not like it's trying to hide. It's just telling him, hey, over here, check me out. And he ends up in Egypt. And he's like, oh, geez, this is some sort of primitive savage culture or whatever. And as he gets there, he comes across a dark-looking god being named Thoth. And he's like, oh, you came. Hey, look, here's the thing. No one else can talk to me. Everybody else is like, is not psychic. They can't hear me. They can't like speak to me. But you're kind. You're all psychic. You can talk to me. I can't be alone anymore. That's great. And Martian Manhunter has his mind closed off as best he can. He's still picking up this stuff, but he's not being like probed deeply. And he's like, dude, however it is you're doing your power, it killed everyone on my planet. You are a plague. You need to stop what you're doing. And Thoth is like, you don't understand. I am so lonely. Please, let me give you a mental hug. And he's like, no, get away from me. And Martian throws a punch and says, like, you turn my people to dust. You need to die. And he's going for, like, revenge at this point. And so he gives Thoth a solid punch. And he's like, no, this guy, like, regardless of what he feels, he is a monster. He has killed numerous, like, an entire race is gone because of him. He needs to be revenged. And as he looks down at this guy, he's like, you don't understand. It's not my fault. And we see his backstory is that he was just a normal human, a normal kid. He always had these powers. And every time he tried to use them on normal people, they would die. They would brain aneurysm and straight up die. And finally, he was locked away in a padded cell, and he put on this golden helmet thing and became this creature Thoth, which I don't know if that's just a psychic link or what it is, but regardless, he ain't nice looking. So at that point, Manhunter's just like, oh, it doesn't matter. You can't end me. You think this is just my first body? And so Manhunter winds up a punch, punches him hard in the face, pops out his eyes, and this smoke cloud emerges from his body. And Martian Manhunter's like, oh, crap. He was a parasite. It was the thing living inside this kid's body. It wasn't the kid himself. Crap. So the smoke thing goes flying across the ocean. Manhunter gives chase. And as he's like, okay, I just made myself a mortal enemy. It can kill me and anybody else it wants, and it can take over people's bodies. That's not good. Luckily, this is not a highly advanced planet. And as he gets across the sea, he lands in modern Metropolis. And he's like, well, it may not be advanced, but it's every bit as savage. So that's the issue. I probably should have just read this with the other Martian Manhunter stuff from last time we had a 5th week, but regardless, it's an interesting idea. I don't know how much I like the fact of a single creature, a single being, is responsible for the death of all the Martians. And it's just some rando on Earth. I don't know. I guess I either want it to be a cosmic entity, something big, something that is a actual like major threat, or I want it to be something like Krypton exploding, where it's something that the Martians could not stop. And I mean, they couldn't stop this either, but you know what I mean? Like some natural disaster. Because as soon as you pin it all on one guy, then you get your revenge and that's it. Like, yes, you can still feel grief and stuff like that, but it still feels like, I don't know, it's a bit too easy to do that. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. But overall, the idea of Thoth is cool. The fact of like, no, there are different types of like reaching out brain telepathy stuff, but some of them are incompatible and some of them will kill each other. I like that concept. Overall, it's a fine enough little backup story. Just because of the size of it, I can't give it over, I would say a 7, but even then, I'm going to knock it down like a half point to a 6.5, just because it didn't quite feel like it was that solid. You know, it felt like he showed up, he punched a guy, and then we didn't even get any resolution there. It's just Metropolis. And now that we're in Trinity War in the main Justice League book, or Justice League of America, I should say, there's no follow-up. There's no backup stories in that. So, yeah, I'm not sure where we're going to get a conclusion here, but it's fine. 19th Century Stormwatch in The Lost City of Gold. This is the backup story to All-Star Western 20 and 21. It is written by Justin Gray and Jenny Palmiotti, art by Staz Johnson. So the last 3 backup stories to All-Star Western was just Adam 1 of Stormwatch going around and collecting all the different members of this team. We have Dr. 13, Jenny Freedom, and Master Gunfighter. And we see in Media Res where they are on a staircase made of gold fighting against Indian/Native American vampires. So just know that's coming. So we cut to 2 days earlier, and they're just making their way through the desert. Master Gunfighter is keeping his distance. He doesn't want to really be part of the group, and they comment on that. And then they keep on asking Adam 1, like, where is this thing? How far do we have to keep going? Come on, seriously. And Master Gunfighter realizes already what's going on. He can smell it in the air. And they arrive at this canyon wall that has a city outcropping on it. And they're just like, all right, from here on out, we might die. So just letting you know. And it says they're hunting a relic from a dead age. And that's what they're after. And Gunfighter's like, yeah, it's going to be dark soon. And we should wait here until morning. And seems like they don't. Seems like they're just making their way up the thing, but they explain specifically what it is they're looking for, which is vampires. And Dr. 13's like, that's stupid. Vampires don't exist. It was made up by a poet. And Adam 1's like, yeah, and the poet was himself a vampire. And so we explain that there was a woman named Mercala Nosferata, who was an aristocrat that was presumed dead on a ship that died, like just fell apart in the journey, but she didn't die as she kept herself alive through the blood of sea creatures, and then she walked all the way across the ocean floor to America, where she met the tribes there and used their magic to basically become a vampire leader. So then we see these glyphs of drawings of the 3 skulls of boundless rule, which are the things that Adam 1 is actually looking for, because apparently you get all 3 and you can just rule the world. You just do it. So at that point, they make their way deeper in the cavern and they come across this city of gold, and everyone's just like, this is fantastic. This is how we're going to get paid. And he's like, yep, we're going to take the city of gold, but also we're here for the skulls. Don't forget that. So they make their way into the city, careful not to wake anything, when all of a sudden they get jumped by all of these vampires and Nosferatu herself. And just like, well, vampires, everyone fight. So everyone starts fighting the best they can. And 13's trying to come up with like explanations for it. He's just like, oh, well, this is just some sort of mass hysteria, surely. And he gets jumped by the main vampire queen and brought up to the top of the stairs. And by the way, this all looks like very Incan. So he's brought up to the top of the stairs of sacrifice. And everyone's like, wait a minute, hold on, why is he being taken? And Adam's like, I may have brought him along for a very specific reason, but we need to go up and save him now. So they run up the stairs, and we see that she says like, yes, now that I have the crystals in my possession, I will now ingest the blood of this virgin into my veins. And she bites Adam, or not Adam, Dr. 13, and ingests his blood. And while he's being bitten, Adam's like, okay, this was not according to plan. And he's like, oh, what do you mean? This felt perfectly orchestrated. Thanks, Adam. So as she is drawing his blood, she recoils and starts screaming out in pain, saying that she's been poisoned. And 13's just like, oh, she's got some kind of a contraption. She's attempting to eat me. And we see that all the other people are fighting against the rest of the Indian Native American vampires. And then they all suddenly start exploding, just into piles of goo. And Jenny Freedom's like, what in the hell is going on? And even Adam 1's not sure what's happening, why his blood seemed to be poisoned to the vampire queen. And he's like, hey, Terrence 13, have you by chance been inhaling massive amounts of garlic? And he's like, yes, that's kind of all I've been eating for several weeks now as part of this experiment I'm trying on the rats of Gotham. And just like, okay, well, you somehow managed to survive that. That's incredible. Regardless, because she exploded, this entire cave is going to come down on us. You guys got to help me get these crystals. And everyone's just like, you seemingly would have let us die here. I feel like that was your intended plan, was you were kind of letting us to be the bait. Is that correct? And he's just like, can we talk about this once we have the skulls? And it's like, no, we're going to talk about this now. And he's just like, all right, then yeah, we gotta leave the cave. You guys are giving up glory. I hope you know that. So they all leave the cave, and as they get outside, 13 is like, all right, put up your dukes. We're gonna fight this out. You would have let me die. I'm gonna punch you square in the nose. And Adam's like, okay, look, I get it. I'm sorry, but like, you have to understand, we just killed an entire vampire thing, so that's pretty cool, right? And Jenny uses her electricity powers to blow Adam back, and they're basically threatening to kill him for using them all as bait, and they thought like, no, got a better idea. And so they strip Adam naked and force him to walk behind their horses throughout the desert as they make their way back, because he's immortal. Like, there's no way he's going to die from this. And as they're on their horses back, Jenny looks over at Terrence and is like, so, Dr. 13, you're a virgin, huh? You want to fix that? And Terrence is like, I dare say what? And she's just like, oh, don't worry, I'll be gentle with you. Cue walking into the sunset, the end. I thought it was fun. It was just a nice little fun story. Based off of what Stormwatch is going through right now in their own book, it's nice to get back to this sort of just rip-roaring fun time of like snarkiness rather than whatever the hell is going on over there, even if this is a different team entirely. So overall, I can't say that much negative about it. The only thing I will say is that it felt a bit simplistic. I do think it could have benefited from maybe just one or two little added riffs into it, because all they did was enter the city, get jumped, and then leave. Everything else was out of their control. So I kind of would have liked one or two extra things in there. But beyond that, this is still a solid 7 in terms of backup stories. It's very good. So I would like to see this expanded into a larger book. Obviously, it did not. I'll take what I can get. But 7 for it for right now. And that's it for all of the backups that DC has put out in the past, 2 months. So, yeah, that's the show. But, as I said at the beginning, this is the 100th episode. This is special. We got special things. I knew past few episodes I've been saying, maybe I'll do something, maybe I won't. I tricked you. I definitely am. So, this episode, coming back for the first time since episode 13, I have decided to call up my very close, dear personal friend, Peter. He, as you might know, is the co-host of the Comics from the Multiverse podcast, the main show on this channel, as he so jokingly calls me, the B-tier content. But no, I know, me and him, we've got a rapport. We've grown some friendship. I've sent out the request to him. I sent him a message, several actually, saying, hey, I've got my 100th episode coming up. I'd really appreciate it if you could say something. Could you send in a little video response to it? And I checked my email today and have gotten a response. So I haven't watched it yet, But I remember when they hit their 100th episode, I sent in this letter to them saying, hey guys, great job hitting 100. I'm really glad I could be here for that. That's really is a big milestone to reach. And I also donated an extra like $100 on their Patreon at the time. But yeah, no, I'm sure that Pete's got something huge in store for me as well. So like I said, haven't watched it, looking forward to it. So let's go ahead and play it now.
Go away, you tard. I don't care about your show.
Okay. So that seems like that was probably it was probably a joke, it was probably, he probably didn't understand, like I was kind of looking for something serious this time. So yeah, it's just a friendly banter between colleagues. Kind of expected that to go on a bit longer though. So next week, yeah, let's just quickly brush that under the rug and just move on to next week before we think about it too long. Okay, so next week we have a bunch of comics coming out for episode 101. We have, in no particular order, Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Green Lantern, Earth 2, Green Arrow, The Movement, Stormwatch, Dial H, Phantom Stranger, and Swamp Thing. Phantom Stranger is a tie-in to Trinity War, so that's cool. And, really expected him to have at least like 2 minutes of something positive to say. Just, I don't know if it... Anyway, 100 episodes. Like I said at the top, thank you so much. It means a lot that you care specifically, because apparently other people don't. But you're here. You've checked this out, so thank you for that. 100 down, 150 to go. That's... So thank you for tuning in. If you want to talk about any of the comics that we've talked about on this show at any point, go ahead and hit me up on Discord or Reddit or Patreon. The links are in the description. I very much look forward to hearing to people who can appreciate the effort and the time that I have put into this show over the past 2 years. And thank you so much for watching or listening, however it is you consume this podcast. And as always, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.